In the year 2033 it began. Gods, monsters, devils, angels, every higher creature from every mythology began to bless those they found worthy and share their powers. They became known as the Hires. They never told us the purpose. Or maybe we were too caught up in what we were being offered to ask why. But eventually, with the emergence of the gates, we realized they were preparing us. Gates are portals that connect our world to some other reality or plane of existence. Through these gates, we find mythological monsters and magical resources, the likes of which were only fantasy until now. The so-called chosen heroes who enter gates are known as the Blessed, and in 2 years it's become the most sought-after career in the world. The Blessed have it all. Money, fame, admiration, and power. They are the most famous and well-known people in the entire world, and some are even the leaders of their own nations. There isn't a single place that a Blessed can go and not be swarmed by paparazzi. They are immensely powerful, beautiful, and charming beings. While their abilities range from an incredibly wide variety, even the weakest among them can crush a car with their bare hands. After 5 whole years, we still have no idea what the Hires' criteria are for blessing a human. Normal salarymen, death row inmates, bus drivers, and even an old lady are just a few of the beings who were blessed and had their lives turned around overnight. Blessed had their bodies forcibly changed into peak condition so that little old lady was able to return to her youth and a crippled man was able to run faster than a bullet train. Despite the seemingly loose criteria, only 1% of the population actually end up as blessed and gain the privilege of entering gates and defending our world. With all of the excitement around the Blessed, we seem to have forgotten the most important question. Why are they doing this for us, and what will they require in return? Woo. Glad that's done. Malachi Saint leaned back from his computer and breathed a sigh of relief when he finally finished his college paper that was due tomorrow. He wasn't a bad student by any means, but if you asked him why he always waited until the last minute to do an assignment, he'd say that he worked best under pressure. Checking the time on his cracked phone, he saw that he had to start getting ready to go to work pretty soon, so he rose from his seat and went to his closet to get dressed. As he slipped on his work shirt and pants that reeked of fast food, he attempted to polish himself in the mirror but became disheartened when he realized even a polished turd is still a turd. Malachi was a skinny young man with dark brown skin and short black dreads that barely went past his ears. His eyes were a warm almond color, a trait he inherited from his father and shared with his sister. He stood at an unimpressive 5 feet 7 inches and didn't appear to have an ounce of muscle on his body. Despite his downtrodden attitude over his looks, he still flashed his signature prize-winning smile in the mirror before exiting his room. Seeing no lights on in their tiny apartment, he checked to make sure they hadn't been cut off again before a sudden feminine voice reached his ears. Heading to work already? Sitting on their old ratty couch was Malachi's sister and only family, Aubrey. Aubrey Saint was the textbook definition of beautiful, with soft brown skin and long curly black hair. She had a short but curvaceous body that was currently hidden underneath an oversized hoodie and a pair of bright almond eyes. Yeah, how are you feeling today? He walked towards his younger sister and gave her a warm pat on the head. You know you don't have to ask me that every day. I'm fine. Aubrey took a second to enjoy her brother's caress, but she didn't want him to keep worrying about her. I'll continue asking whether you want me to or not. Malachi chucked, before finally moving towards the door. I'll be back later, don't forget to lock up, okay sis? I won't forget, just be safe. She waved him out the door warmly, before she resumed sitting alone in the darkness, illuminated only by the light of her phone. Geez, that girl. Malachi didn't feel right about leaving his sister alone, but he had no choice. His shitty job was the only thing that could support them and they had no other family to rely on or turn to. Both their parents were killed in a gate eruption 4 years ago and they'd been scraping by ever since. But still he felt guilty about leaving her alone, especially after. Shaking his head to free himself from dark thoughts, Malachi got into his rusty old car that was currently missing its front bumper before turning the key and heading to work. He'd just begun to drive when his phone suddenly started vibrating. He looked at the name across the dirty screen and smiled when he saw a name he was all too familiar with. The contact picture showed a divinely beautiful woman with icy white hair and crimson-red eyes. She had smooth white skin that looked like it was made out of marble and was posing back to back with him with an aloof demeanor. Answering with a swipe across the glass, Malachi's cheerful voice contained no traces of his earlier somber mood. How's my favorite Blessed doing today? Shove it up your ass, you sarcastic cunt. The feminine voice on the line immediately retorted back. Malachi touched his chest as if her words touched him to his very core. "Ah, you have such a way with words, my friend." There was a fit of giggles on the other line before the woman responded. "How you been, bastard?" Malachi couldn't help but smile as they conversed. He was unspeakably grateful fame hadn't changed her. The woman currently on the phone was his oldest friend and closest confidant, Aisha. They'd grown up together since they were babies because their parents were classmates in high school. Honestly, she was a lot like a sister to him as well. 3 years ago, Aisha received 2 blessings from gods and her life changed considerably. She received the blessing of beauty from Aphrodite and the blessing of war from Ares. These simple but monumental facts turned her into a superstar among superstars. With her exquisitely beautiful yet fearsome demeanor, she easily captivated the attention of the people and was famous overnight. And as one of the few people alive with a dual blessing, she was just as deadly as she was beautiful. Clearing out dungeons in record time was no difficult task for her, and she soon became something of a living goddess. With her talents, it was no wonder her rating was SS. "So, how's your sister?" "No." Malachi immediately shut the conversation down. I am just asking a simple question, shit for brains. You've had a crush on her for forever, do you think I don't know you?" Malachi rolled his eyes. An audible gasp was heard over the phone. Ads by Pub Future. She honestly can't believe she's been found out, this dumbass. This was a SS ranker? If he was a scummy person, he would have sold this story to the tabloids for a nice buck. How did you find out? Her voice was almost a whisper. "You've been looking at her like you've wanted to eat her ever since her boobs got bigger than yours." "I have not." "What would all your fans think if they knew their warrior goddess was such a pervert?" "Who's the pervert?" "Don't think I don't remember that time I found that MILF porn under your bed when we were 9. I told you that was my dad's." The two continued to argue over the subject until Malachi arrived at work and it was time to say goodbye. "You know, you don't have to work so hard. Please let me help, Dash. I won't take any money from you, Aisha. I know what you're trying to do, but it just wouldn't feel right. TSK, stubborn fuck. You wouldn't have me any other way. You wouldn't have me any other way." The beep signaling the end of the phone call also signaled Malachi's victory in rejecting Aisha's handouts, yet again. Ever since she'd first come into her money, she'd been offering to take care of them. While he appreciated the gesture and knew it would make their lives much easier, his pride just wouldn't allow him to take money from his friend, especially if he knew he had no chance of paying her back.
With a sigh, the young man got out of the car and prepared to walk into the restaurant only to see a pair he recognized all too well. His boss, who was only a few years older than him, was standing next to an attractive young woman with gray hair and black eyes. Upon seeing the pair, Malachi let out an impressed whistle. "You sure move on fast, Melanie?" The woman looked slightly embarrassed before the man next to her decided to speak for her. "You know, Mal, I've been sleeping with this little beauty for about 2 months. But imagine my surprise when she told me she actually used to be with somebody like you." 2 months, huh? Malachi showed a bitter smile as he realized that he'd not only been dumped for someone else, but he'd also been cheated on. Melanie began. "You don't have to pretend to care about him, Melanie." The man named Derek once again interrupted. "Weren't you telling me how he couldn't afford to buy you anything nice, and you only went out with him in the first place because you felt bad for him?" Malachi showed no real reaction to this. Deep inside, he knew. He always knew. There was no way a girl as pretty as Melanie should have ever said yes to him. She was one of the most popular girls at his college. What did he even have to offer a woman of such caliber? Even if he was attentive, kind, and loving, was that not something that any person could do? Derek owned multiple chain restaurants just like the one Malachi worked at, and his cousin was even rumored to be a blessed. It was no wonder she chose him in the end. He wasn't even certain what possessed him to confess to her in the first place. "Look, Mal, you were a half-decent worker, but I just don't feel comfortable having you around." Derek walked forward and took out an envelope from his pocket. "This is your last paycheck. Don't come around anymore." Faced with such humiliation, Malachi could not resist a final sarcastic retort. "Damn, Derek. Didn't think you'd be so threatened by little ol' me. You really know how to give a guy some confidence, huh?" Derek smiled and chuckled. Truthfully, he always did find Malachi pretty funny. But now was the time to set an example. Pow. Derek played football in high school and still kept himself in decent shape. So naturally, when Malachi received his overgrown fist directly in his jaw, there was only one way for the situation to play out. Check out LTSTVL on NOVL/Vind, CM.
Funk.
Malachi's body hit the ground, and he slipped into the realm of unconsciousness. When Malachi awoke, he realized he was on a soft surface, and his nose was filled with the smell of lilies. With one whiff of that familiar floral scent, he knew exactly where he was. Slowly opening his eyes, he saw a familiar beige ceiling. "You're awake." Suddenly, a warm, mature voice was heard, and Malachi immediately felt his heart speed up. The source of the voice was a gorgeous older woman with chocolate brown hair and soft white skin. She had a delicate, motherly figure with an enormous bust that was barely contained in her white blouse. Her gentle light brown eyes made Malachi feel seen and cared for, an emotion he hadn't felt in far too long. With one quick look around, he realized he was in her nicely decorated living room, as he had been so many times before. "Ms. Ehara? How'd I get here?" The woman pouted before placing a delicate hand on Malachi's stomach. "WREUOW." The woman leaned back with a satisfied nod after giving his stomach a pinch from hell. "How many times do I have to tell you to call me Say now? You're an adult already, and you make me feel old." "I got it, I'm sorry. How did I get here, Say?" Say moved to get some ice for Malachi's jaw that was beginning to swell. "I got a call from some girl asking if I could pick you up because you'd gotten into a fight, so I closed the shop and rushed right over." Two realizations immediately hit Malachi, like a ton of bricks. One was that the girl Say was referring to must have been Melanie. The second was that he'd caused Say, who was a single mother and a struggling restaurant owner, to lose customers.
"I'm
so sorry for the trouble." Say looked behind her to see Malachi staring at the ground. "You've grown up so well." She'd known Malachi ever since he would come over to tutor her daughter while they were still in high school. He was the reason she was able to get into the same college as him. When his parents died, she was the first one to offer to take him and his sister, and yet he promptly refused. Despite the odds, he graduated 2 years later and even got into a decent college. Even though his life was incredibly hard, she'd never seen him when he didn't have a carefree smile or a sarcastic remark to make. /W novel chapters are published on no/vel/vind, co/m. It was truly a miracle how one boy could still be so carefree. Yet here that boy was now crying over inconveniencing her. Malachi flinched when he felt his body become wrapped in a warm embrace. "Say, you're such a kind boy, Malachi. I'm sure your parents would be proud." When she released him, they sat in silence for a minute while she iced his cheek. "Well, since it's my fault the restaurant closed early, let me buy a meal," Malachi suddenly said as he pulled out his wallet and smiled with a swollen jaw. "Mal, I couldn't possibly dash." "Please," Malachi insisted. "Let me repay you." Seeing the unwavering determination in his eyes, Say realized she wasn't going to win this fight and hastily got up to prepare her most popular dish. "Fine, but don't you dare complain if it's not good." "I wouldn't dream of it." As Say walked away, Malachi placed a palm over his rapidly beating heart. "Damn, she's too beautiful to be that close." While the two shared a meal, Say asked how such a kind boy like Malachi could possibly get into a fight and was devastated to hear the story of what happened. She of course offered to hire him at her shop, but Malachi knew she wasn't really in a position to do such a thing without compromising her own living situation and promptly refused. After he said his goodbyes, he walked home with his mind in a million different places. "She gets more beautiful every time I see her. What am I going to do without a job? Fuck, that big bastard can throw a punch. Do I go back to tutoring? Do I finally swallow my pride and call Aisha? I have to do something, anything." With a sigh, he sat down on a nearby park bench and stared into the sky. The crisp, cool night air temporarily alleviated his worries, and he felt his body immediately relax.
Well,
with a night like this, it can't be all bad. He felt a smile spread uncontrollably across his face. "You like the night, do you?" Suddenly, Malachi turned his head to see a strikingly beautiful blue-skinned woman sitting next to him. Her hair and eyes were as dark and empty as the blackest of shadows, and yet it did not make her any less captivating. Her black dress tightly clung to her body and glimmered with sparkles that looked like stars in the sky. Malachi should have been downright terrified to have this strange woman suddenly appear next to him, and yet her presence gave him the same relaxed feeling that he got underneath a full moon. "Yeah, kinda peaceful, don't you think?" Malachi returned his gaze to the sky. The woman seemed to like his answer, as she showed a smile that was absolutely dazzling.
"Ida."
She slowly rose up from her seat and came to a stop directly in front of the dazed man. "I've made my choice." "What choi dash?"
Before he could finish speaking, she placed a single finger on his forehead and his eyes rolled back as he slipped into unconsciousness once again. Back at Say's house, she was washing dishes as she thought of her conversation with Malachi. Humph, hateful girl. How could she be so cruel? Just thinking about how the girl had treated Malachi made her blood boil. Such a gentle boy. I hope one day you find someone to treat you the way you deserve. Suddenly, the front door opened and a young girl with pink hair and eyes walked in. She wore baggy blue jeans, a lace top that revealed her black bra and a leather jacket. Hey Mom. The girl quickly wrapped her arms around her mother's back and planted a kiss on her cheek. Welcome home, my sweet girl. Say enjoyed her daughter's embrace for a little longer before an idea flashed into her mind. Honey. What do you think about Malachi? Those two are around the same age. Let's see if I still retain my matchmaking skills from my youth. The girl immediately stiffened and stared at her mother with a slack-jawed expression. Did he actually do it? The girl's voice was so low, it was almost a whisper. Serana? Do what dash? Well, it's about time he did it, but I'm telling you right now, I won't call him Dad. Serana nodded, seemingly satisfied as she folded her arms. Pardon? What the hell? Who chose this one? Thousands of murmurs rumbled throughout the large white coliseum where hires were in attendance, curiously eyeing the frail-looking boy that had shown up next to be blessed. What is this? Where am I? Malachi woke up and sleepily rubbed his eyes. He felt like he'd just had the most pleasant and relaxing dream imaginable, yet he was laying on a cold stone floor. He speaks. A loud masculine voice, like crackling thunder, boomed in Malachi's ears. Finally able to get his bearings, Malachi looked around and realized where he was. But he didn't dare to believe it. Speak your name, mortal, and tell us the limit of your ambition. Malachi slapped himself to make sure that he wasn't dreaming, and no matter how hard his hits were, the scenery in front of him was never changing. Rows and rows of divinely beautiful beings from every pantheon. Gods, demons, angels, and the most famous demigods imaginable. At a glance, he could see a man with one eye and two crows sitting on his shoulders. Odin. Looking around more, he could see an incredibly busty woman with blonde hair and pink eyes, whose face was hidden under a veil. Malachi wasn't certain, but given the way his lower body was reacting, he suspected that this woman was Aphrodite. It's exactly as the blessed described. He continued to spin around in awe as tried to recognize as many gods as possible. There was Zeus, Horus, Thor, and even Lucifer. My name is Malachi Saint. He finally introduced himself after gawking at these beings who could kill him with a blink. And as for my ambition, Malachi began, but then stopped when he realized the answer to this question was slightly embarrassing. It is all right, child. You are free to speak your true thoughts here, we will not condemn you for them. A woman sitting next to Zeus, who Malachi could only assume was Hera, attempted to ease his mind and loosen his tongue. Malachi took a deep breath before he spoke. For ambitions? I have none. Some seemed shocked or even amused by his words, but Malachi wasn't done. I just want to be strong so that no one would ever think of touching anything that belongs to me ever again. I do not know why you have chosen to bless some of us, but if your legends are to be believed, you will expect something in return. Now none of the gods were laughing. Out of all of the humans that had been blessed so far, not one of them had suspected that the gods might have had some ulterior motive for doing this. If before they were simply interested in the young human in front of them, now they were completely focused. But let me say this. I don't care what you want as payment. I have lived through being unable to protect someone twice before, and I will do anything not to experience that hell again. The boy was shaking with every word, and Achilles, the primordial goddess of misery, smiled as she dragged her nails down her face when she sensed that oh so delicious emotion the boy was now releasing in waves. Discover W stories on no/e/bin.com. So to that end, I will pay any price you require, and I will be your most obedient soldier. All I ask is that you give me the power to protect the last person I hold dear. Malachi's words contained the utmost sincerity, and for a moment there was silence. Well said, my child. A soft masculine voice spoke. The source of the voice was a gentle-looking old man with a pure white beard standing next to a man with skin of brass and hair of wool. Internally, Malachi was smirking a little bit. I was an atheist just a few years ago, now look at me speaking to God himself with Jesus sitting right next to him. Life truly was a funny thing. Next, a god will assign you a blessing. If more than one wishes to bless you, then you may choose between the two, or if they come from the same pantheon you may take them both if your soul can bear the burden. Malachi listened to the rules, before frowning. Why can I not have blessings from gods of different pantheons? A falcon-headed man with deep bronze skin chuckled when he heard Malachi's question. Greedy aren't we? He simply shrugged. Nah, desperate. The being Malachi guessed to be R.A. chuckled before he explained. While we are all higher beings as you humans call us, our powers come from different sources, and are therefore incompatible. If you attempted to hold a blessing from two opposing pantheons, your soul would shatter like glass against stone. Malachi nodded. While he wasn't completely satisfied with this, he realized there was no other way. Now, who would like to offer this one their blessing first? God asked as he looked around. I would. Malachi flinched when he heard the voice of someone that he barely knew yet could never forget. He looked towards the height of the Colosseum where there were 7 thrones above the Greeks. There he saw the strikingly beautiful woman he met just before coming here. Zeus seemed slightly fearful of this woman, as evidenced by his respectful tone when speaking to her. Are you sure you dash? I, Nyx, primordial goddess of the night, wish to bestow Malachi Saint with my blessing of the night. Will you accept? She promptly ignored the quivering thunder god and focused her eyes directly on the human that she'd brought here. Furious murmurs immediately broke out amongst the gods. Malachi smiled when he realized that the beautiful and enchanting woman he'd met earlier was actually a primordial goddess. And such a being wanted to bless him? Only 2 humans are blessed by a primordial god, and they are both SSS rankers, capable of sinking an entire continent overnight. He really couldn't believe his fortune. He got on one knee and bowed respectfully. I gratefully accept. As soon as the words left his mouth, a connection was formed between Nyx and Malachi that made him feel like he was overflowing with power. He felt incredible, like he'd just been enveloped in the welcoming embrace of a lover under the night sky. It was as if a part of himself had been returned after it had been missing for so long. He felt whole. Impossible. There was no backlash? How is he still standing? That was her main divinity. He can actually bear the power of a primordial without issue? He can actually bear the power of a primordial without issue? That guy Arenas picked was bleeding from every hole in his body by now. Malachi listened to the shocked murmurs of the gods and tilted his head in confusion. Did I do something wrong? Nyx disappeared from her seat and appeared right in front of him to ease his mind. They are simply in awe. No one has ever seen a human who can bear the weight of a god's main divinity without any sort of backlash. The woman carefully touched his face and stared at him as if she were looking at something fascinating. You are quite intriguing indeed. That was how deep the influence of the blessed ran in society. My gods, who is that? A new student? He's so handsome. Go and try to talk to him. As soon as Malachi stepped out of the car, the entire parking lot became abuzz. In this day and age, seeing divinely beautiful people was fairly normal. Not only because of the blessed, but because magic-infused beauty products were also floating around on the market, though they were very expensive. But this man getting out of the car was somehow leagues above all of them. The sun glimmered perfectly off of his rich chocolate skin, making him look positively radiant. He wore a simple white button-down shirt with clean black slacks and neat leather shoes. His long dreads dangled freely around his waist and blew majestically in the wind. His simple yet stylish outfit, combined with his heaven-defying looks, made it look like he was heading for a photo shoot instead of a literature class. 7 Sit N-N C/M for L test vels. Naturally, Mal could see everyone staring at him, but he thought they were just curious about his car. It was the latest model after all. He'd finally had a chance to look at himself in the mirror when he changed clothes earlier, and while he could admit he'd changed a lot, he wasn't that much more handsome than before, right? Because of the noise-canceling earbuds in his ear to help with his new enhanced hearing, he couldn't hear the whispers directed towards him either. Come to think of it, I wonder if she'll be in class today? Upon entering into the classroom, Malachi of course turned heads once again, and the class that was once abuzz was now deadly silent. But now Mal was taking extra care not to look around. Melanie was in this class, and even if he did not look at her, he could smell her. She used a special peach body wash that Mal had memorized in hopes of buying her some as a gift. He went to his seat and promptly sat down and prepared to wait for the class to start, only to be swarmed by a few other students only seconds later. "Hi, are you new here? What's your name? Can we be friends? Do you have a girlfriend? Nice to meet you, man. That car in the parking lot is yours, right?" Mal's head was spinning. Even though none of these people had ever been malicious to him, they still had never paid him any attention. Suddenly having people be so chatty towards him was slightly unnerving. "Been here the whole semester." Mal responded dryly. "No way. You're a real cutie, and you're tall as hell too, there's no way I would have missed you." His voice really does something for me. This guy's funny. As the group giggled aloud and tried to converse with who they believed to be a new student, a young woman pushed past the group and stared directly at Malachi. "Excuse me, but do you mind moving? My friend and I usually sit here together." When Malachi saw who asked, he couldn't suppress a happy grin that made the hearts of every woman present skip a beat. "What's good, Serana?" "Been a minute." Serana stared blankly at this extremely charming stranger. "Do I know you or something?" Malachi realized he'd be facing a lot of awkward situations like this in the future. "It's me, Malachi. Don't joke with me, my friend doesn't look anything like you. Are you gonna move or not?" Malachi sighed. "If I'd have known you were this much of a dumbass, I would have charged your mom more to tutor you." He paused for a moment before taking back his words. "Nah, what am I saying? Your mom's so gorgeous, I probably would have tutored you for free." Hearing those words caused Serana's pupils to tremble as she stared at the man in front of her in a new light. She only knew one man who was degenerative enough to call her mother hot to her face. "Mal? Duh. What the hell happened to you? My mom said she saw you last night, but she didn't mention anything about this." Serana was currently poking, pinching, and prodding at Mal's face, chest, stomach, and arms. "Ah well. I kinda got blessed after I left your place." "You what?" Not just Serana, but the entire class was now in shock. This handsome guy was actually Malachi. The same guy that used to come in and wouldn't ever speak to anyone. His only friend in class was the hot girl he'd always sat next to. "Haha, I know I'm a little taller, but is it that surprising? Who gives a fuck about your height, you look like a male model." Serana screamed. Why was he acting like this was no big deal? Only 1% of the worldwide population get blessed, so how does he not understand how monumental this is? "Aren't you being a bit overdramatic?" Malachi tilted his head. "No." The entire class yelled. "Ah." Malachi could only scratch his cheek in mild embarrassment. Apparently he was better looking than he'd originally thought. Who knew? Suddenly, the door opened and the teacher came in. Dr. Victor Andrews was a highly decorated teacher famed for his literary works and informative lectures. "All right, it's time for class, kids." He sighed deeply before looking up to see a group of students swarmed around an attractive young man. He didn't remember having a kid this handsome in his class, but honestly he didn't remember half his students anyways. "Hey you." Malachi pointed at himself. "Me?" "Yeah you, take those sunglasses off, you're inside." Malachi flinched. "Teach, I really don't think you'd be comfortable, dash." "Well, I'm touched that you're concerned, but either take those off or get out." Suppressing the urge to zap this professor immediately, Malachi removed his sunglasses for the first time and revealed his new eyes to the entire class. "Oh my god. That's awesome. I want him." While the other students found Malachi's eyes to be cool or even charming, it's because they weren't looking directly into them. For those that held prolonged eye contact with him like his professor was currently doing, Mal's eyes were incredibly unnerving and made him feel like a mouse standing in front of a lion. Even when he turned his back, he could still feel the intense gaze boring holes into his back, causing him to sweat profusely. He ended up ending class a whole 30 minutes early, just to get away. "Hey Mel, are you busy right now? You gotta come by the restaurant." After class let out, Serana was excitedly chatting with Mel. After she'd gotten over his drastic transformation, they'd been able to resume normal conversation, and she was now inviting him to her home again as they left campus. Malachi checked his new golden watch. It was currently 1 o'clock and his meeting with the Immortal Moon Guild that Aisha set up wasn't scheduled until 6, so he had plenty of time to go and hang out with her. "Sure, let's go. I wonder how Say's doing." Malachi wondered aloud with a charming grin as the duo walked towards his car. Surana was so distracted by the excitement of riding in the nicest car she'd ever seen that she'd forgotten to mention that she'd ended up giving away his biggest secret to her mother the night before. As the duo left the parking lot, they didn't realize they were being watched by a young pretty girl who was making a sad expression. Her phone suddenly buzzed and her mood only worsened when she realized she'd just received a message from the last person she wanted to see right now. Mal. I think I really might have made a mistake. Upon entering Say's restaurant, Malachi was happy to see there were a few customers today and they appeared to be enjoying the food. They were mostly older people and one young boy and his father. Surana had him take a seat and went to go grab her mother in the kitchen, so he was currently sitting at a table alone scrolling mindlessly on his new phone. Eventually, he got bored since he'd lost all his contacts and simply stared out the window into the busy street. As he watched people walk by busy with their everyday lives, he couldn't help but think about how much his life had changed in one night. This was the happiest he'd been in a very long time. Do not be complacent for a single second. Malachi was shaken from his happy thoughts when he remembered the words of the rowdy lightning god who'd blessed him. That's right. I have to keep growing. I don't even know how to use all of my powers yet. I try to be. Malachi didn't know how to respond to the woman's closeness to him, so he elected for his standard nonchalant persona. All right. God seemed to have finally gotten over the shock of this event and was now trying to move on with the proceedings. He appears to be fine, so does anyone else want to offer their blessing to this child? Immediately, hundreds of gods from the Greek pantheon clamored to offer this human their blessing. Order! Order! Zeus cried in an attempt to ease his rowdy children and siblings. It wasn't like he couldn't understand. After all, the potential of this human in front of them was immense. But even still, this human had already shown himself to be sharp. If he saw how desperately the gods were attempting to form ties with him, he might start asking questions, and right now such a thing should be avoided. It simply wasn't the time. Malachi, was it? Why don't you choose the god that you'd like to be blessed by? Zeus then stuck out his chest with pride. Of course he was sure he'd be chosen. He was a god king with an entire pantheon under his control. Legends of his terrible powers and might had been passed down throughout human history. Surely there was no better choice, right? Well, almost. His eyes drifted to the 7 seats where Nyx was sitting and suppressed a shudder. Those gods are primordials, and they are monsters that defy reason. In his infinitely long life, he has never feared anyone, not even his father, but those monsters sitting above him made his golden blood run cold. They were just that incomprehensible. Though there were more primordials across different pantheons, the Greeks were famously ill-tempered. Malachi dragged his eyes over all of the gods in the Greek pantheon before his eyes landed on the 3 in the front who were sitting on the biggest thrones. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Each of them had already blessed a human already, so Mal knew what powers he'd receive if they blessed him, but when he remembered his sister and thought of the conduct of 2 of the gods, he immediately shot down the thought when the idea that they might touch her bubbled up in his mind. No way in hell. Speaking of hell, Malachi then looked at the dark-haired man who had a bored expression. With Hades' blessing, he would be able to summon legions of the undead and make them do his bidding. But Malachi had always been the kind of person to handle things himself, so he did not really want to lead an army. Even though it was a pretty cool visual. He couldn't help but sigh internally. This was literally the dream of every man and woman, and he was being so indecisive. Sigh, should I just pick at random then? Suddenly, out of the corner of his eyes, Malachi saw something that intrigued him and turned his back to the Greek gods and walked towards a different pantheon altogether. What is he doing? Human. Are you lost? I had thought him smart, but this is just stupid. Why is he walking toward the Egyptians? Malachi was too distracted by this feeling he was getting to pay the irate gods and demons any mind. Eventually, he came to a stop in front of a fairly tall woman wearing Egyptian robes. The woman had the head of a panther and her skin and fur were both a deep obsidian. She stared at the human who'd come in front of her with 2 bright yellow eyes that did not hide her curiosity. How beautiful. Malachi was so entranced by the deep black of her fur and skin, he didn't even realize he'd muttered those simple words. I'm sorry. He hastily bowed and tried to correct his mistake. May I know your name, goddess? The beast woman looked him over curiously before she opened her mouth. Batet. Malachi nodded. He hadn't heard of this goddess before, yet she'd undoubtedly struck some kind of chord with him. Cool if I ask for your blessing? Immediately the gods began to buzz. Human, did my pharaoh not tell you that attempting to hold two blessings from opposing pantheons was tantamount to suicide? Despite the cat goddess' surprise, her tone hadn't changed much and she was only giving Malachi a blank look. The boy briefly looked towards Ra, who was sitting a fair distance away, and smiled bitterly. He did, but, is it rude of me to say I feel drawn to you? Batet hesitated for a moment before she spoke. Are you trying to bed me, mortal? No, goddess, I apologized if it seemed that way. Malachi hastily deepened his bow and attempted to calm his beating heart. What if she gets offended? She'll chew my head off. Naturally, Bast could smell the fear coming off Malachi and decided he must have been telling the truth. Bast, you're not actually considering this, are you? Zeus roared. That's right, this is madness. Odin agreed. What would it mean if he actually succeeded? Tsukuyomi pointed out. I don't know. Bast responded only when the moon god spoke. But it'll be interesting nonetheless. She really intends to do it. Zeus was panicking internally. Follow EOist stories at nvl/by/n.com. The boy would undoubtedly die and they would lose their most promising candidate yet. Nyx. Will you not stop? Zeus turned around and looked toward the 7 thrones only to see that they were now all empty. Zeus clenched his fists and blue lightning began to crackle around his body. Damn it, damn it. Batet brought her clawed hand to Malachi's face and tilted it upward so that she could look him in the eye. I, Batet, goddess of felines, women's secrets, fertility, and domesticity, wish to bestow my blessing of felines and women's secrets to you, Malachi Saint. Will you accept? Malachi could not suppress the grin that formed across his face. I accept. Almost immediately, his head began to feel like it would split apart. Malachi felt like he had 2 little children running around causing havoc inside of his mind. They were smearing shit on the walls, screaming at the top of their lungs, and breaking everything they touched. Damn it, be quiet. Malachi's command fell on deaf ears as the 2 opposing powers continued to fracture his sanity. Getting real annoying, shut the fuck up. As if they were responding to his will, the 2 energies stopped before separating into different corners of his soul. With a relieved sigh, he wiped away the sweat that had formed on his forehead and opened his eyes to see. Bast? Before she was a tall powerful-looking woman with a beast's head, yet now her frame had shrunk in size and she had a gorgeously delicate human face. On top of her head was a sea of long black hair and 2 fluffy cat ears. If before she was beautiful, now she was simply immaculate. It's a good thing she didn't ask me that question before I would have had to lie to a goddess. Malachi didn't know exactly what would have happened to him, but he was sure higher beings were not fans of deceit. He could tell, because he'd constantly seen gods shooting middle fingers at Loki since he'd arrived. You actually survived somehow. Bast's voice before was much more regal and authoritative, but now she sounded serene and soft, like the purring of a cat. Ah. Yeah, I guess I did. Malachi rose up from the ground and stretched his body. While he could immediately feel some changes when Nyx blessed him, right now, he didn't feel much of anything. Maybe it'll kick in when I go back to my body? Mal suddenly noticed something didn't feel quite right and turned around to see every god in the Colosseum staring at him open-mouthed. No one could speak. Nor could they even think. How could something so incomprehensible be standing right in front of them like this? He'd just made the blessings of 2 gods from 2 different pantheons submit to him easily. I feel fine, so, can I choose again? The silence somehow multiplied before Zeus spoke for all of the gods present. Boy, are you telling us you can handle a 3rd blessing in addition to the 2 you already have? Malachi poked his stomach a few times, just to be sure before responding. Yeah? Like a bomb had gone off, several gods immediately began to attempt to solicit him with promises of their most powerful blessings. Zeus, God, and Odin were still in such shock that they did not even attempt to calm down the rowdy gods. Suddenly, 2 flashes of light appeared in front of the young human. Kid, you're really something strange. Accept my blessing. What an intriguing human. Do you mind if I am the one to bless you? The 2 looked at each other for a moment before an argument broke out. As I have yet to bless anyone, I think this honor should fall to me, should it not? The one with a soft-spoken voice who appeared in a flash of golden light was an angel well over 6 feet tall, wearing pure white robes. Behind his muscular back were 6 pristine wings that looked large and imposing and yet incredibly welcoming. This man was the Archangel, Michael. Shove off, pigeon. Naturally your blessing would be a waste. My power would serve him much better in the eons to come. The man with a booming voice like that of rolling thunder, who appeared in a flash of lightning, was a red-skinned being who appeared to be a demon. Wearing simple robes that covered his lower body and 2 large drums behind his back, he was incredibly frightening and imposing. This man was the god Raijin. Actually, Malachi hesitated to interfere in the debate of these 2 higher beings. If you'll allow it, I wouldn't mind accepting both. Once again, Malachi had delivered a shock to every higher being in the room. Did you just say, you want to accept both of our blessings? Michael asked while cleaning out his ancient ears. I did. Huh. That is how a man should be. I like you, mortal. The booming laughter of Raijin echoed throughout the Colosseum. Shall we, pigeon? Raijin clasped the Archangel on his shoulder and prepared to begin. This is madness. Even if he has been lucky so far, there is no way he can handle a blessing from 4 entirely different religions. Michael tried to reason. My apologies. I'm glad you understand. I called you pigeon earlier, but now I see that chicken is more appropriate. Without waiting for Michael to retort, Raijin released him and prepared to bless Malachi. If you want to have a chance at this, now is your only opportunity. Michael ground his teeth in frustration. This boy was undoubtedly the best human to be selected since they'd begun the trials. If there was even a chance for his faction of heaven to emerge victorious, he had to take this gamble. He was the only one left who could after all. The other archangels had no more divine energy left to give to humans, and God had elected not to interfere in this matter. With an exhausted sigh, he turned to face Malachi once more. Do not blame me if your demise is more excruciating than you could have imagined. You will only have your own ignorance to blame, child of man. Noted. Malachi nodded. I, Raijin, god of thunder, lightning, and storms, wish to bestow unto you my blessing of lightning. I, Michael, archangel of fire, wish to bestow unto you, Malachi saint, my blessing of fire. Michael/Raijin, will you accept? I gratefully accept. Raijin had a satisfied grin as he flipped off the wind god Fujin, who was watching with clear jealousy. For a moment, nothing happened. Mal started to think maybe the blessing had failed. And then it began. Aha! Malachi released a blood-curdling scream as his body was racked with the most intense pain imaginable. His bones, his blood, his entrails, it felt like his very existence was fighting against each other. He simply lay on the ground in an unimaginable agony, unable to even move. D.I.'s Coover dated novels on NOV/E/Lbin.co. The gods watched this with neutral yet slightly disappointed eyes. The most promising human they'd had in years, and now he was going to be another corpse in the dust. Suddenly, Nyx's cool, serene voice began to play in Malachi's mind amidst all of the anguish he felt. Relax, the one I chose is much stronger than that, right? Let me help you a bit, child, but keep this between us, okay? Almost immediately, Malachi's screaming became dull groans, and he felt the turmoil running throughout his body calm down considerably. The pain had now diminished into a dull throb and a feeling of fullness enveloped him. Malachi knew instinctively that he'd hit his limit on blessings. Who? Malachi slowly sat up on the ground and stared into the intense eyes of a smiling Raijin and a stunned Michael. Sorry about that, guys. I think I ate too much. Malachi chuckled at his own bad joke before he was lifted off the ground by an excited thunder god. Huh. Is my chosen not amazing? Malachi looked into the eyes of the gods and once again saw them staring at him with disbelieving eyes. You know, I don't think any of these guys remember the last time they've been shocked like this. Oddly enough, Mal was beginning to feel sleepy and was having a hard time keeping his eyes open. Sensing his weariness, Raijin placed him on the ground in the middle of the Colosseum where he originally appeared. He looked deeply into Malachi's eyes while he was still conscious. Listen to me, mortal. No, Malachi. You will undoubtedly be the most fearsome blessed your world has ever seen. The humans will love you, they will envy you, and some will even fear you. But understand that in the larger scheme of things, none of that matters. The god's playful demeanor was no longer present and his eyes were hard and serious. Train well. Grow the blessings we've given you, Do not be complacent for a single second, because there are worse things than those that lie in the gates. Malachi nodded in understanding as his eyes began to flutter closed. Oh, and mind your learning curve. I'm sure yours will be especially interesting. The god chuckled. Malachi was now fast asleep as his body shimmered before breaking apart into flecks of gold and disappearing from his stage. After he left, there was a moment of silence before God spoke while looking at the three individuals present who'd blessed Malachi. I believe a new wager will have to be made now. Each of the gods sighed as they realized that this would be another long and arduous debate. Hey fucker. This is my bench, find your own. 5 more minutes, Aubrey, then I'll move, I promise. You hearing me, shithead? I said this is my bench. The dirty homeless man attempted to smack the man he found sleeping on his bench only to be completely surprised when the man caught his hand with ease. Damn it. Who the hell are you? Wait, why do I sound like that? Malachi released the homeless man and slowly rose up from the bench where he'd been sleeping and examined his body. For starters, the formerly 5 feet 7 inches 20-year-old was now a staggering 6 feet 5 inches. His body, which before was skinny and frail, was now tightly packed with the well-defined muscles of a wild animal. His dreads, which formerly barely went past his cheeks, were now dangling freely around his waist. While the changes should have made him incredibly happy, Malachi couldn't help but be annoyed as now his perfect-fitting work shirt had turned into a suffocating tank top that exposed the lower parts of his now well-defined abs. His pants and shoes weren't much better, with the former being tight enough to reveal his business imprint and the latter having bursted open entirely. Damn. No wonder you thought I was homeless. Malachi spoke to the homeless man while pushing his dreads out of his eyes, allowing the man in front of him to get a good look at his face for the first time. Why your eyes, why you? Malachi tilted his head in confusion before his mind was overcome with a terrible headache. Ugh. Malachi dropped onto one knee and held his head while he groaned in pain. Hey man, are you tweaking? Tell you what, if you share whatever you got left, this bench can be yours. Malachi naturally couldn't hear the nonsense ravings of the homeless man in front of him as he was much too distracted by another fact. He could see. Not just the area in front of him or behind him, he could see everything in the world that was currently under the cover of night. He could see families sleeping, couples on dates, stressed adults taking late-night drives, and even crimes being committed. All of it flashed by in his vision endlessly, and he felt as if his brain was going to explode from the rapid influx of knowledge. Aisha. I need Aisha. He thought of her, and he could suddenly see his dearest friend a large distance away in a lavish hotel room naked with a pretty woman's head in between her legs. You fucking pervert, we don't have time for that. Malachi fumbled to pull his phone out of his pocket only to crush it when he pressed too hard. Malachi's strength had been augmented to several thousand times past the normal human threshold, so breaking his phone was as easy as putting his finger through paper. Damn it. Damn it. I have to get home. Malachi weakly said as he stumbled off the ground. Malachi took a step forward when his body became a dark mist and he disappeared from the park, leaving only a stunned homeless man that muttered something incomprehensible about how his bench never gave him magical powers before, so maybe he was sleeping on it wrong. When Malachi reappeared, he was outside the front door of his apartment. Fumbling for his keys, he was able to gingerly take them out of his pocket even with his splitting headache and managed somehow not to break the door. Unlocking the front door, he drunkenly stumbled in and fell to his knees on the floor after closing the door behind him. Who are you? A horrified small voice came from the corner of the room where Aubrey was currently shaking as she stared at the unknown man in front of her. Hey Aubrey, I need help. Malachi weakly said. Why do you know my name? Please take whatever you want and leave, just don't hurt me. If Malachi had been in the right state of mind, he would have cried when he heard those words. Aubrey had severe androphobia due to an incident in her past, and it was so bad she didn't even leave the house anymore. Her brother was the only male in her life that she could talk to and not be afraid of. But now it looked like she had developed a fear of him as well. Aubrey, please listen to me. It's me, Mel. I've been blessed and I'm having a really hard time. I need you to call Aisha for me and tell her I need her help. The tears that were flowing from Aubrey's big almond eyes immediately stopped when she heard this man's story. And Mel? The girl hesitated. She couldn't see his face clearly since the room was dark, but she could see two cat-like yellow eyes peeking out from behind his very long hair. Suddenly, the man released another groan of pain before he lurched forward and collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. For almost 5 whole minutes Aubrey's body was still paralyzed by fear and she did not dare to move. Slowly, she grabbed a broom from nearby and turned on the light in the living room to get a better look at the man's face. Moving his dreads out of the way with the broom, she stared hard at the face of the man claiming to be her brother. The man was divinely handsome. While all blessed have their looks augmented when they are reborn, she'd never seen anyone that fit the standard of attraction more than him. He looked like the word lust was specifically created to describe the feeling that occurred when looking at his face. Even knowing that it might be her brother, she began to have strange thoughts, but when she remembered the times he made her eat his boogers when they were younger, her delusions were permanently ceased. And now, thinking that this might be the same scrawny kid that she'd just waved goodbye to a few hours ago, she was naturally quite shocked. But when she saw the uniform that barely fit his body along with his name tag, all fears fled from her mind and she hastily pulled out her phone and dialed a number. The phone didn't even ring twice before it was picked up by an out-of-breath woman. "Hey Aubrey? What can I do you for, shit? I mean what can I do for you?" Aubrey giggled lightly when she heard the rushed and nervous way Aisha answered the phone. She couldn't fathom when she started acting this way around her, or even why, but she found it slightly amusing. The world-famous war princess was now stuttering on the phone with a girl who was barely 18 years old. "Aisha, it's about Mal." Immediately, the white-haired woman felt her heart drop and she immediately feared the worst. "What's wrong, is he okay?" Well, he somehow got blessed." "The hell did you just say?" F0 low new hapters at nov/el/ben/.com. If the orgasm Aisha had just had prior to this phone call wasn't enough to spice up her night, the information divulged on this phone call gave her the shock she needed. "I'm coming right now," was all Aubrey heard before Aisha hung up the phone. "Ugh, my head." Malachi groggily awoke on the couch in the living room. The sunlight peeking through the curtains revealed to him that it was now early morning, and he relaxed slightly when he realized he wasn't being overloaded by his new powers. He suddenly realized he could hear a heartbeat next to him and turned his head to see Aubrey sleeping on the floor next to him. Wait, hear a heartbeat? Malachi's hearing was now so finely tuned he could hear his sister's heart thumping away in her chest, clear as day. He also noticed that his sense of smell had improved drastically and he could smell so much more vividly than before. Bastet's blessing, no doubt. Malachi could barely suppress the smile that formed on his face when he remembered the captivating Egyptian goddess. As a man that had always been captivated by older women, he found her mature charm to be especially alluring. Malachi suddenly heard hurried footsteps approaching and soon smelled a familiar scent of blood and roses. So she called her after all. He didn't bother to get up since Aisha had a key and his body felt sore. The door unlocked with a click and Aisha entered with a worried look on her beautiful face. Was she actually worried about me? Malachi was unbelievably touched. Gods, I hope I look okay. Aisha was continually fixing her dress and straightening her hair. This bitch is only worried about Aubrey. Malachi quickly sat up with an annoyed look on his face. When Aisha's bright red eyes landed on Malachi, she was stunned into silence. Mal? In response, he simply offered her a middle finger. That small provocation was enough for her to snap out of her trance and return to normal. You really got blessed. Seems like it. Malachi removed his shirt that had been choking the life out of him ever since he'd woken up and sighed in relief. Did Freya bless you? Seeing her friend's perfectly sculpted muscular body and his enchanting new appearance, she thought it only logical that he received a blessing from a goddess of war and beauty. Malachi only shook his head. I'm sure she would have, but no. Then which god blessed you? Gods. Malachi corrected. Pardon? Malachi's yellow eyes stared deeply into Aisha's bright red ones. I was blessed by multiple gods, not just one. It only took a second for her to process the information before she showed a pristine white smile that only those she loved were allowed to see. Mel. That's great, this changes everything. She excitedly hugged him, seemingly unbothered by the fact that he was currently shirtless. He'd actually managed to get dual blessings, just like her. This was amazing. This would change everything about his future and his money troubles would be a thing of the past. So which gods blessed you? Come on, tell me. She was so excited, she didn't even notice her yelling had woken the young girl that was asleep on the floor until now. HM? Oh, Aisha, you made it. Aubrey flashed the blessed woman a groggy smile that made her heart skip a beat. Malachi of course heard it and rolled his eyes. Why yes, hello. You look as beautiful as ever. Aisha complimented. How can that be true when I just woke up? Aubrey giggled before moving to offer the white-haired woman a welcoming hug. Thank you for saying so though. It feels nice. Aisha's face soon turned an unhealthy shade of scarlet and she desperately fought the urge to sniff the hair of the girl in her arms. Malachi watched all of this with a dry gaze, and when his sister finally remembered he was here, she quickly hugged him as well. Mal, how did this happen? He sighed before he calmly retold them the events of last night. Though when he told Aisha and Aubrey how he lost his job, he had to physically hold the girls down so that they did not turn Melanie into meat paste and Derek's store into rubble. Once he'd calmed them down he explained how he ended up at Ms. Ahara's, to which prompted both of the girls to give each other cheeky grins. Malachi elected not to comment once again, and then he came to his encounter with Nyx in the park. Now Aisha was not laughing, smiling, or drooling over Aubrey. She knew just how incredible it was for her friend to receive a blessing from a primordial god. But that would prove the least shocking thing she heard today. Her friend that she thought was blessed by 2 gods, was actually blessed by 4. In the entire world, no one possessed more than 2 blessings. The fact that her friend could store all those blessings in his soul was an accomplishment in itself. Not only that, but they also came from different pantheons. Of course, Aisha did not believe it at first, but then Malachi attempted to use his powers for the first time. Black lightning crackled from his fingertips. His hands changed into clawed paws with black fur and his eyes were now permanently cat-like. He snapped his finger and golden flames appeared in his palm. He attempted to use his blessing from Nyx as well, but it proved much too difficult, so he just told her what happened last night and how he saw everything, including who she spent the evening with. She was so shocked by the information, she wasn't even bothered by the fact that he'd seen her having sex with her personal assistant. After his story was completed, both girls stared at him for a full minute. They were looking at him like they were seeing some kind of freak of nature. Well, I guess I should start getting used to things like this, huh? Suddenly Aubrey leaped up and gave her brother the biggest hug imaginable. My brother is amazing. Seeing Aubrey's sudden action allowed Aisha's brain to properly reboot and she congratulated him as well. Do you want to join my guild? She suddenly asked. Guilds are organizations formed by Blessed that provide all manner of services. They train new recruits, go on gate raids, deal with gate breaks, and some are even law enforcement specifically for Blessed. You mean Immortal Moon? Isn't that an all-women's guild? Mal asked with a shocked look. Well yes, but I'm certain the guild master would make an exception for you. I don't know. Seems kind of weird. Even if he wanted to be in a guild with his best friend, would it not be weird for him to join one that was exclusively women? There's an 850 million signing bonus for recruits that have AB rank aptitude or above. You know, I've always wanted to join you guys. Mal's hesitation disappeared immediately. All that money was going to help him move Aubrey somewhere nicer, and he could even hire some maids to help around the house so she wouldn't be alone all time. Even though he probably could have made that money somewhere else, the chances of him being taken advantage of at Immortal Moon were relatively low since Aisha was a fairly high-ranking member. Shit. I have a paper due today. Malachi sighed when he realized he still had to go to school. He'd always promised his mother that he'd graduate college and he wouldn't change that for anyone, not even the gods. He wouldn't be the first blessed to attend college, but he would still gain a lot of attention. No sweat, we can go after. Aisha immediately waved away his concern. But she noticed quite a pronounced problem. She looked down at his tight work pants and saw the large imprint that wasn't being hidden in the slightest and gave him a dry look. This at N0VL/BIN. For the best novel reading experience. Are all of your clothes like this now? Malachi followed her gaze to his crotch and felt his face get hot. Yes. Aisha could only sigh. It's fine, you dressed like shit before anyways. You bitch. She rose to her feet and stretched her lean muscled body while ignoring his outburst. Guess that means we're going shopping. Oh my god, it's her. Who is that guy next to her? He's gorgeous. What the hell is he wearing? His eyes are so scary. He must be a blessed, but I've never seen him before. Currently, Aisha, Aubrey, and Malachi were walking throughout a luxurious mall. Malachi found some of his dad's old clothes that just barely fit him and was able to squeeze them on so that he could look somewhat decent. While he still looked slightly out of place in his father's old faded clothes, his body was covered and therefore he could go out to shop and get new ones. Normally, Aubrey was much too afraid to come out of the house for any reason, but somehow Aisha was able to coax her into coming with them. Though when considering her reputation, it wasn't hard to understand why. While normally blessed were always swarmed by fans and most enjoyed the attention, Aisha was careful to make her dislike of crowds and strangers well known to the public. The first time a man approached her with a phone in his hand, she took it from him and stuck it up his ass. Naturally, it made several headlines, and when she asked for the reasoning behind it, her answer was simple. I don't like people running up to me and sticking their phones in my faces for their bullshit YouTube videos or some stupid-ass social media app. After that, there seemed to always be an invisible wall around Aisha whenever she went out, which is why she could travel without security. And currently, Aubrey and Malachi were piggybacking on her infamy to get a problem-free mall visit. The group's first stop was the Sunglasses Shack. The girls had both complained to him that his eyes were really intense and made them feel like they were standing in front of a predator. Malachi still hadn't looked at himself in the mirror, so he had no idea what the girls were getting at, but he obliged them nonetheless. What about these? Aisha picked up an expensive-looking pair of black sunglasses. Malachi gingerly took the sunglasses from Aisha's hand. Before they'd left the house, Aisha had gone over some basic exercises that he could do to control his monstrous new strength. He was now able to pick up things without obliterating them again. Though he almost forgot everything he'd learned when he saw the price tag on the glasses he'd just been handed. These are over $700. Malachi said in disbelief. Yeah, do you like them? Aisha wasn't bothered by the price in the slightest. She'd spent billions to buy her own anime studio in Japan so that she could pay people to animate her favorite manga and light novels. A measly $700 was nothing to her. I could only afford to buy them if I sold everything I own. Malachi chuckled and prepared to put the glasses back before Aisha stopped him. I know you can't afford these yet, idiot. That's why I'll be buying everything today. What? I could never let you. Just pay me back later once you sign with the guild and stop whining. Malachi proceeded to open and close his mouth like a goldfish before he finally gave up and let Aisha buy whatever she felt like he needed. All in all, he got a nice pair of sunglasses, an entirely new wardrobe from multiple designer brands, a new phone, and they even had time to get a new car before it was time for Malachi to head to class. Aubrey elected to stay and hang out with Aisha for a while before they split up. Malachi said a silent prayer that his friend would not taint his sister's innocence and drove to school. Malachi attended a very famous institution in the south of the United States. While it was known more famously for its athletic programs, its academic requirements were quite stringent as well. Malachi had found his standard parking spot, and before he'd even stepped out of the car, he was attracting tons of attention. The car he'd gotten was actually the newest top-of-the-line Evade Rusher. He and his dad had always loved muscle cars, and it was a bit of a dream of theirs to one day be able to afford one. The gag was they didn't even buy this one. As soon as Aisha walked into the dealership, she was offered the car for free by the owner if she agreed to take 2 photos, one for the company page and another for his family. He materialized a small ball of golden fire in his palm and watched the flames crackle silently. Even if he knew things were about to get very serious, he could not suppress the grin that formed on his face. This shit was too cool. Whoa. Suddenly, a small boy rushed over to Malachi when he saw him playing with the ball of fire in his palm. Hey mister, are you a blessed? Malachi was slightly embarrassed when he saw the reaction he was getting. Yeah, I guess I am. So cool. Are you strong like Alex Heller? I don't know kid, I just got my powers yesterday. Malachi chuckled and honestly answered the kid's question. At this moment, the kid's father ran up and tried to scold his child. I'm sorry, I hope he wasn't a Boda, what the fuck? At this moment, the father saw the golden flames in Malachi's palm and nearly forgot why he'd even come over in the first place. Daddy, look, this guy's a blessed. I see. At this time, the customers in the restaurant had begun to crowd around Malachi and stared at him in awe. I don't think I've seen you anywhere before. The father of the small boy had gotten over his initial shock and was now curious about Mal's identity. Yeah, I haven't exactly signed with the guild yet. Well, do you mind if we get a picture? Malachi was slightly flustered, but in the end he obliged. He took pictures with the young boy and his father, and afterwards a few more people wanted to take pictures with him as well. Say wiped the copious amounts of sweat from her forehead as she was pulled from the kitchen by her daughter. What's so important, Sarana? I have work to do, kiddo. I know, Mom, I know, but I promise this is totally crazy. Why's it so rowdy out there? Say became worried when she heard a commotion as she got closer and closer to the seating area. She hoped there was nothing wrong with the customer's meal. Pushing open the door to the front, Say saw her small crowd of customers gathered around the most gorgeous man she'd ever seen. Sarana, do you know what this is about? Say was staring in shock at her small number of customers all crowding around one man. She'd never seen him before, and yet there was something so eerily familiar about him that it gave her chills. That's Malachi, Mom. Come again? I know it's hard to believe, but that's really him. Apparently he got blessed. As Malachi finished taking the last picture, he looked up to see a mature woman who was slightly sweaty and staring at him like he'd grown a second head. With a chuckle, he weaved through the small crowd around him and came to a stop directly in front of the two women. Mal? Is that really you? Say stared up at him in utter disbelief. She was taller than him just last night. And now he was towering above her like a grown man. It's me, Say. My hair looks a little different, so I understand the confusion. He joked. The woman was still too shocked to even giggle at his attempt at humor. She just stared at him in disbelief as if he were going to shit a golden egg any second. She couldn't help but remember what her daughter had told her the night before, and her face became a very noticeable scarlet. Hey, you feeling okay? You're not overworking yourself, are you? Malachi leaned in and attempted to press his palm against the woman's forehead to feel her temperature, only for her to release a small yelp and take several steps back. I'm fine, no need to worry. Oh, that's great. Why is she acting like this? He wondered. Even though it was rare, there were those that treated the blessed with fear instead of reverence. He immediately feared the worst, and Malachi wasn't the type of person to have lingering questions, so he boldly decided to ask her directly. Hey, you're not afraid of me now, are you? Unbeknownst to the both of them, Malachi had activated his second blessing from Bast. His blessing of women's secrets made it so that any woman he came into contact with would be unable to lie to him if asked a question. It gave him an aura of a calm, approachable man that could be trusted even with their deepest and darkest secrets. And no, of course not. I could never be afraid of you, Mal. You sure? 'Cause you almost jumped out of your skin a second ago. I am sure. That was for a different reason. Oh? What might that be? You're incredibly handsome. At this moment, the usual calm and carefree Malachi disappeared, and all that remained was a gobsmacked young man. Staring back at him was an equally shocked mature woman. Staring at both of them was a pink-haired young girl who looked like she was going to throw up. Why did I just say that? Why did I just say that? Well, it was great to see you, but I should get back to cooking. Before she could embarrass herself even further, Say turned around and ran back to the kitchen at an impressive speed. Sarana? Mal asked. Yeah? I promise I won't make you call me Dad when I marry your mom. I wouldn't do it even if you paid me, dickhead. Currently, Mal and Aisha were standing outside the headquarters of the Immortal Moon Guild. It was an extremely elaborate white and gold building with handcrafted glass windows and the emblem of a full moon with an infinity symbol carved in the middle. Read latest CH pictures at n/VELBI.co/m. Malachi could not help but give Aisha a sideways glance. Ever since they'd met up, she had this dopey, cheerful look on her face. He wasn't sure exactly what she and Aubrey had done in their time together, but he was hoping she didn't spend the time being a creep. The two walked into the building and headed directly past security to the elevator. Looks like even the staff fears Aisha. It was worth noting that Malachi was getting a lot of stares. While some were lustful, most were just curious about what a man could possibly be doing in a women's-only guild. As the pair came to a stop in front of a large set of double doors, Malachi finally asked the burning question in his mind. Are you certain I'll be accepted here? Aisha finally came out of her Aubrey-induced stupor and looked at her longtime friend like he'd just asked the most outlandish question imaginable. Are you stupid? Seeing Malachi's confused look, Aisha fought the urge to punch her friend in his stupid handsome face. Do you really not understand how valuable you are? I understand no one has held this many blessings before, much less from different religions, but is that enough for them to accept me? Unable to listen to any more, she raised her hand to deliver Malachi a hard smack across the face when an idea sparked in her mind and she lowered it instead. You know what? I'll let you see for yourself instead. Before he could ask what she meant, she pushed open the double doors and strode confidently inside. Malachi followed closely behind her and suppressed an erection as his eyes fell on the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Sitting on a soft spacious couch drinking a cup of tea was the guildmaster of Immortal Moon, Luna Autumn. She wore a loose black and red kimono that showed off her ample cleavage and delicate pale skin. Her long silver hair fell past her bottom and her soft pink eyes shone like rubies. On her forehead was a small red tattoo that resembled a lotus flower. Aisha dear, how many times have I told you? 2. Knock. As Luna's eyes landed on Malachi, the usually calm and composed woman completely lost her train of thought. Malachi felt it when he saw her as well. It was as if in this person, both of them would find something that they desperately needed. Aisha ignored her guildmaster's chastising and promptly made introductions. Luna, this is a friend of mine. Malachi approached the seated woman and offered her a handshake. Malachi Saint. For the first time, the woman showed a smile as dazzling as the stars in the night sky as she took his hand. It's very nice to meet you. Sit down, let's talk. Currently Luna, Aisha, and Malachi were all sitting in Luna's office, drinking tea. Ever since they'd sat down, Luna had not taken her gaze off the man in front of her. His presence was slightly boundless, yet he behaved in such a carefree manner, she knew he couldn't have been blessed for very long. But what is this attraction I feel? While the man in front of her was undoubtedly handsome, such things were usually not enough to sway her emotionally like this. She became curious about the man sitting in front of her and desperately wanted to know more about him. So, why have you brought this handsome stranger here? She crossed her legs sensually and leaned deeper into her seat as she stared expectantly at Aisha. Not one to beat around the bush, Aisha answered without wasting any time. I want you to offer him a contract to join the guild. Are you joking? Not in the slightest. Now that Luna knew what this meeting would be about, she was no longer so relaxed as she looked at the man across from her in a new light. Aisha is not one to play favorites no matter who they might be, so what makes you special enough to earn her direct help like this? Before Mal could even open his mouth to speak, Aisha interrupted. Actually, I want you to wait for his aptitude test tomorrow before you find out. Now Luna was really confused. Did Aisha really bring her a new recruit that hadn't even taken an aptitude placement? And did she really expect her to offer a contract to someone she'd brought in fresh off the street? And he was a man? Was she mental? I will only tell you this. Aisha leaned in and stared directly into Luna's eyes. His value is incomprehensible. If you miss this opportunity, the other top 4 guilds will snap him up in an instant and gain a monumental resource. Malachi wasn't exactly sure what his friend was doing, but he trusted her after being friends for such a long time and elected to just be silent while she made the negotiations. Luna was now staring even harder at Malachi. As one of the top 5 guilds in the world, there wasn't much that Immortal Moon actually lacked. If you asked why Immortal Moon was last among the top 5, the answer would undoubtedly be raw power. While all of the women in the guild were monstrously talented, that was all. They were not blessed by powerful hires with destructive powers and instead were able to crawl their way to where they were through their ingenuity and hard work. On the other hand, the other top 4 guilds have members blessed by hires like Set, Poseidon, Lucifer, and even Shiva. It wasn't as though Immortal Moon had never tried to recruit someone with more destructive powers before, but they always seemed to be swayed by the more attractive offers made by other guilds. Because they were more powerful, they got to challenge higher-ranked gates with less casualties and reap even greater rewards. Or if they joined Immortal Moon, they felt like they should be compensated with one of the attractive guild members. Aisha knew all of this, so for her to tell Luna that she'd certainly regret it if she did not sign this man meant a lot. Frustrated with so much thinking, Luna ruffled her hair before making a decision. Arg. Alright, look, here's what we'll do. It was now nighttime and Aisha and Malachi were walking back to the car. Malachi was currently nursing a small headache. Read latest chapters at n/VELBI.co/m. It seemed like the darker it got outside, the more changes began to take place in his body. He felt at peace, comfortable, and even more alive, yet his head felt like it would burst from everything he could currently see. While it wasn't quite as bad as last night, it was still extremely unpleasant. "You don't look so good." Aisha had finally noticed that Mal was having a hard time with his new powers and immediately became concerned. "My blessing from Nyx seems to be activating on its own." Seeing her friend lacking his usual trademark smile and unable to make a joke, Aisha immediately knew it was serious. "Alright, look at me." The two stopped in the middle of the parking lot and Aisha began trying to teach Malachi self-control. "Close your eyes, Mal." He obliged and closed his eyes, despite his worsening headache. "What does Nyx mean to you?" "She is like a welcoming mother. She is comforting. She is endless, and her love is overflowing." "What does she embody?" "She is the night personified." "Can you feel her?" Malachi concentrated on his connection to Nyx. He tried to recall the feeling of her delicate hands on his face and the warm smile she'd given him. He recalled the way she spoke, walked, and even smelled. "Yes." Aisha nodded in satisfaction. "That's good, now hold on to that feeling. Realize that your goddess would not have blessed you if she did not see something in you and slowly try to control your power." Malachi nodded and focused. Instead of fighting to try to deactivate his blessing, he instead began to will it to see only what he wanted to see. Slowly, images from all over the continent vanished until he could only see his friend in front of him. "Well, this is a surprise, since when are you helpful?" Before Aisha could throw a punch, Malachi thanked her profusely and the two got in the car and drove off. As they rode silently through the streets, Malachi finally asked about her decision to hide his powers during the meeting. "You still don't get it, subconsciously you're still acting like you are some run-of-the-mill blessed even when there are already signs of your strength being utterly terrifying. What on earth makes you think dash? Idiot, you can see half the world at any given time without even understanding how. You could instinctively use your blessings without any training, not to mention they are from 4 entirely different gods from different pantheons. One's an archangel." "Shut the fuck up." This time Aisha did smack Malachi over the head, making him chuckle. "It'll be good for you to see how people react now that you've been granted this massive opportunity." Malachi had never been very confident ever since they were children. She was glad that being blessed hadn't turned him into some egotistical dick who thought he was better than anyone else, but she did want him to improve his self-esteem. Like that, the two rode home in the dead of night as Aisha silently anticipated the storm that would come tomorrow with Malachi as the center. It was a new day and Aisha, Aubrey, and Malachi were all heading to the assessment facility. Once again, Aisha was able to coax Aubrey out of the house much to join them and the two seemed to be getting along even better than before. "I've got to get a girlfriend, I'm sick of third-wheeling." Malachi rolled his eyes as they arrived at their destination and got out of the car. The group entered a white futuristic-looking building. The registration process was fairly simple. S&D soon Mal was waving goodbye to the girls as he went in for his evaluation. "Do you think my brother will do well?" Aubrey asked as the two sat together in front of a monitor that displayed the trials. Aisha gave the young girl a cheeky smile. "I think he will be the most sought-after man in the world." "So you say." Both Aubrey and Aisha turned around to see Luna strutting up to them accompanied by 2 members of Immortal Moon acting as bodyguards. "Let's see if he's as intriguing as you've led me to believe." Luna sat down alongside the girls and politely introduced herself to Aubrey. "My gods, it's really her. She's even more beautiful in person. Who do you think she's here to recruit?" Unbeknownst to them, the moment the guild master of Immortal Moon showed up in person, several spies in the assessment facility made calls to their higher-ups. Seeing that Luna was here in the flesh was all they needed to know that Luna must have had her eyes on a powerful new recruit. "Boss, there's something you should see. I think you might have to come in person for this one again." Upon entering the testing facility, Malachi was given a pair of simple sweats to change into and led to a room with 10 other examinees inside. While he didn't think much of them, most immediately hated him. What kind of guy is so concerned with looking cool that he won't even take his sunglasses off inside? And for an aptitude placement no less. They slowly came to the conclusion that this guy wouldn't amount to much if all he was concerned about were his looks. With his extremely handsome face, he must have been blessed by a god of beauty and let it go to his head. Find up Ted Ovels on n/v/elben, co/m. Alright examinees. First up is the 4 pillars. The overseer for the assessment was a gray-haired old man with a tall stature and a muscular build. The 4 pillars, as they are most commonly referred, are the 4 basic powers that are bestowed to all blessed without exception. Enhanced speed, strength, durability, and telekinesis. Examinee 0531. You're up first. At the examiner's beckoning, a young man with pale white skin and purple streaks in his hair stepped forward. The examiner pressed a button on his wristwatch and suddenly the group was in an incredibly spacious room the size of a football field. You know the drill. Let's hurry up and do this. Without waiting for another word, the young man stretched his body before he dashed forward. There was a gust of wind followed by a sonic boom before the white-haired young man reappeared in his original position. Whistles. 4.26, not bad kid. That's a rank level speed. The man only gave an uninterested nod before continuing. The next segment of the test was strength-based and the examinee was required to toss a car over a measured distance. The frail-looking young man was able to toss a car over 40 yards, earning him a C rank level strength assessment. The next to be assessed was an attractive young woman with caramel-colored skin and a muscular yet curvaceous physique. She had long ash blonde hair and fiery golden eyes that hadn't left Malachi since she first saw him. Malachi of course noticed her hungry looks but did nothing about it. Even if he found her attractive, he felt like he had other things to prioritize in his life at the moment. The woman was equally as impressive as the man before her and ended up getting a B grade in both the strength and speed assessment. In the lobby, a small crowd had formed around the monitors and were watching the proceedings with great interest. While it was still early, the examinees so far looked to be very promising this time around. As examinee after examinee took the test, it became harder and harder to guess who Guildmaster Luna was here for. Look, it's the Guildmaster of Ragnarok. Everyone turned their heads toward the front door where a well-built man with fiery red hair walking in confidently. He wore a neat maroon suit with smart brown shoes and was covered from the neck down in Nordic tattoos. He strode past the other people present and came to a stop in front of Luna to offer her a warm handshake. Lady Luna is as radiant as ever. The red-eyed woman stared at his hand for a moment before turning her gaze back to the monitor. Would you expect anything less? Huh. Of course not. The man did not seem to be fazed by the woman's unapproachable nature in the slightest. Why are you here, Morgan? Luna asked, but deep inside she already knew the answer. Can't I come to scout new talent every once in a while? I had no idea other guild masters had so little to do. Perhaps I overwork myself. It's nice to see so many friendly faces here. A new voice spoke. Luna's blood began to boil when she heard a voice she wouldn't forget in a million years. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice to see a handsome blonde-haired man in a sky-blue suit. The man had a pair of bright silver eyes that contained imperceptible traces of contempt as he stared at Luna. It's Alex Heller. The Guildmaster of True Sky is here too? Why are all these big shots showing up today? Sensing a potential media storm, a few onlookers discreetly made calls to various reporters. When you're in this business long enough, you learn to see the signs of when shit is about to hit the fan. Alex strode forward and shook hands with people in the crowd before coming to a stop in front of the scowling Luna. Aubrey tensed up slightly when she felt all the males around her, but Aisha hurriedly took her hand and gave her a reassuring smile. She felt safe. Funny seeing you two here. Alex smiled at the 2 guild masters currently present. Luna elected not to speak and Morgan simply rolled his eyes. What's with the chilly reception? I don't believe there's any bad blood between us. Then your memory is shorter than my patience. Luna growled. Filthy Greek. Morgan spat. This man was guild leader of the #1 guild in the world and was responsible for poaching several of the blessed that Luna and Morgan were attempting to sign. It wasn't an exaggeration to say he was the most powerful man in the country. Subconsciously, Luna began to worry. She wasn't sure that Malachi wouldn't be swayed by the amount of money and resources this man could offer. If he was truly as valuable as Aisha had said, she absolutely could not afford to lose him. Aisha seemingly sensed her worried and patted her reassuringly. He is not a disloyal person, so you don't need to worry. Luna only smiled bitterly. Since when was she so easy to read? She calmed down tremendously and turned her focus back towards the monitor. Is that all? I'm actually a bit disappointed. Alex clicked his teeth in mild annoyance. He was hoping he'd rile Luna up enough to start a fight in front of all these people and frame her as the aggressor. After she'd rejected him, he'd do anything to make her look bad and send her guild plummeting downwards. "Ah, it's brother's turn," Aubrey suddenly exclaimed. She subconsciously squeezed Aisha's hand and the girl promptly returned it. Seeing that Luna was watching the monitor with new intensity, Alex grinned in satisfaction. "So this is who you're waiting for." When Alex saw the extremely handsome man with sunglasses on during the assessment, he immediately frowned. While he couldn't believe that the recruit was a man, there was another fact that bothered him. He'd seen a lot of new blessed like this who were so absorbed in their looks and new image that they did not realize the severity of the world they were now in. Typically, such people did not live long. He almost did not want to spend the money just to teach Luna a lesson. Oh well, money can always be earned back. When Malachi stepped up for his examination, the other participants sneered inwardly. Surely this smug-looking pretty boy wouldn't amount to anything. There were only two who noticed that Malachi was not as incompetent as he looked. As he stood on the starting line, Malachi had a realization. "I haven't had the chance to run in this body yet." Deciding it would probably be fine, Mal crouched down into a sprinting stance before the examiner gave him the signal and he took off. Boom! There was a sonic boom, a gust of wind and a loud explosion on the other side of the room. The ground splintered beneath his feet and the shards of earth flew backwards into the other participants. "What the hell?" The examiner was shocked. What just happened and where was the examinee? Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, laughter was heard from within a cloud of dust that was slowly dispersing, and now everyone was able to see clearly what had happened. Malachi was currently pulling himself out of a him-shaped hole in the wall. That was crazy. I was just like that cartoon coyote. His jovial laughter could be heard throughout the entirety of the room, but everyone was much too stunned by what they'd just seen to join in. That speed, it was easily S rank, wasn't it? Yeah. He didn't even go down and back, but still. I didn't even see him move. He must be blessed by a powerful god. Shock was evident on all of the faces of the recruits present and rightfully so. Among the blessed, those with an S rank aptitude in any stat area are incredibly rare. Almost as rare as those with a dual blessing. Malachi returned to the starting line in another impressive burst of speed and everyone immediately took a step back. "HM? Why are you all looking at me like that?" "Why your eyes?" one of the recruits pointed out. Only then did Malachi realize he'd lost his glasses when he ran face first into the wall. He immediately became annoyed when he realized why the room looked different. Damn it. Those were really expensive. Wanting to relieve his frustration some, Malachi kicked a nearby car for the strength test, only to send it flying and leaving it embedded into the wall right next to the hole he'd made a moment ago. Whoops, he muttered before he slowly looked at the examiner. That counts, right? The examiner nodded blankly as he stared at the sight of a car that was leisurely kicked over 100 yards. This boy, his strength is S rank too? Outside in the viewing area, people were equally stunned and buzzing with excitement. Luna did not pay this any mind and instead turned to Aisha and Aubrey. "You could have told me his strength and speed were S rank, you know." Aisha came out of her small stupor and gave Luna a confused look. "I didn't know though." "What?" Luna's reddish-pink eyes widened in surprise. "There's more we haven't seen?" Usually, if someone was blessed in one area, they weren't that great in another. Everything must be balanced after all. So for this man to have more hidden was simply unthinkable. Aisha and Aubrey looked at each other momentarily before they turned back to Luna. Yep. Follow the latest novels n/velben.com. Lots. Luna stared dumbfounded at the two girls who seemed to be completely serious and rubbed her temples. Maybe I should have just signed him immediately like Aisha said. The examinees had now moved to a much smaller room. In one corner, there was a metal table lined with a knife, a gun and a sword that glowed with a faint blue light. On the other side of the room was another table lined with various weights. "All right, boys and girls, your durability will be tested first," the examiner ordered, and everyone followed him towards the table. The test for endurance was simple. The participants would line up and subject themselves to injury, beginning with a simple knife stab. If they were fine, they would move up to a gunshot and then a slice from a magic sword. The severity of the wounds as well as the time they took to heal would determine the level of endurance. One by one each of the examinees lined up and let themselves be wounded. Most only received small scratches that barely bled from the knife and healed in about 30 seconds. Bianca Tate, the woman who'd been staring at Malachi the entire time, was unable to be injured by the knife or the gun. When she was injured by the magic sword, the wound bled for only 10 seconds before it completely healed, not even leaving a scar. They're both fucking monsters. The examiner stared back and forth between Malachi and Bianca, who were eyeing each other curiously. He could only imagine the storm that would follow when they left this room and their results were released. Surprisingly, Malachi's durability was only an A rank. His healing rate was a bit slower than Bianca's at 16 seconds, but he wasn't all that disappointed. He was still upset over his smashed sunglasses. All that money, wasted. He barely registered that they had moved on and were now on to the final portion of the first half. Each of them now had to lift up varying degrees of weight without actually touching it. From 50 pounds to 100 all the way to a whopping 1,000. Their rating was determined by how much they could lift as well as how long they could hold it. Most of the examinees seemed to have practiced as they could all hold 300 pounds for at least 5 minutes. But the most impressive by far was the aloof white-haired man with purple streaks in his hair. He easily held up 700 pounds for 15 minutes and his only sign of exhaustion was a single bead of sweat running down his forehead. Bianca was similarly impressive, managing to hold up 600 pounds for 10 minutes. Their grades were A and B respectively. As Malachi stepped up to take his turn, he was still stewing over his broken glasses and was barely even present. Let's just lift this shit and go home. Reaching out with his mental force, Malachi lifted every single weight laid out in front of him and closed his eyes as he thought of all the ways he could have better used $700. What the fuck? Oh come on. This isn't even fair anymore. What the hell is he? Malachi couldn't even hear the surprised murmurs and gasps when he did something outstanding again as his mind swam with regret. Groceries for a whole month, light bill, phone bill, gas bill, car insurance, I could have caught up on some old bills too. He was very upset about breaking his sunglasses. Aisha? What am I seeing? Aisha turned her gaze towards the monitor where Malachi was being orbited by several weights as he silently pondered something with furrowed brows. The timer at the bottom of the screen read 30 minutes and 48 seconds. Turning back to her shocked guildmaster, Aisha fought the urge to roll her eyes. Boss, I think you should learn to not be shocked by the things you'll see him do, otherwise your brain will explode. Luna absent-mindedly nodded. What kind of a freak was this kid? Morgan and Alex weren't having much better reactions. With a glance at each other, both men knew they'd come to the same conclusion. This man had to be blessed by at least a god king. There was no way he got such incredible power from someone like Persephone after all. As if this bastard and his blessing from Surtur wasn't enough, now there's another one of us. Alex was fuming as he stared back and forth between Morgan and Malachi. Alex could tell that this brat who was barely half his age had to also be blessed by a primordial and he immediately got a headache. Malachi was just as strong as him, and his other stats weren't far behind his either. If he wasn't controlled, he'd become a problem that he couldn't allow to live. Inwardly, he was thanking Luna. Your F4-ite stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. If she hadn't let him know about such a big fish, he might have missed the catch and had to put him down instead. Maybe I should let her have the next one as a thank you. Alright, we get it, you can put them down now. The examiner stammered. HM? Oh, right. Malachi snapped out of his thoughts and placed all of the weights back down. The young man looked up at the other examinees and most flinched at his gaze. The only ones who didn't were Bianca and the white-haired young man. Even though they did not flinch, each of them were giving him strange looks of their own. Why are you looking at me like that? Mal got tired of waiting and decided to just be direct. You're a monster. You're hot. The replies of the two of them came too swiftly for Malachi to follow. Before he could even respond, the examiner was leading them to the final test. They were taken to a room lined with dark slabs with gems embedded in them. Alright kids, you know the drill, stand in the circle in the middle, then when your hire's gem glows, demonstrate the powers you were blessed with. Who wants to go first? Surprisingly, Bianca stepped up to go before anyone else. She walked forward confidently and stood on top of the engraved runes on the floor. Almost immediately, on the stone slab designated for the Greeks, a single gem shone with a bright red light. Hephaestus? Not bad at all, girl. Would you demonstrate for us? Bianca smiled widely, and it was clear she'd been waiting for this. She held out her palms, and 2 bright orange flames appeared. Could I get some targets? The examiner pressed a button and 4 targets slid down on the other side of the room. Bianca breathed in before she willed the balls of fire to leave her hands and impact the targets. When they connected, each of the targets melted into puddles. The instructor let out an impressed whistle before reading off her chart and giving her a final score. B grade strength, B grade speed, S grade durability, and A grade telekinesis. Congratulations, Bianca, you're an A rank blessed. The tan-skinned girl showed a cheerful smile that tugged at the hearts of most of the male examinees, and they subconsciously vowed to impress her with their powers. The white-haired man, whose name was Rio, was next to go, and surprisingly enough, was blessed by Loki. His ability was to shapeshift into just about anything, with almost no one being able to tell he was a copy. His rating was B. Each of the examinees stepped up, but their blessings were all unimpressive and their ratings never went above C. Finally it was Malachi's turn and all eyes were immediately glued to him. As he walked towards the runic circle in the center of the room, he inwardly contemplated whether he should attempt to hide some of his powers. Eventually, he decided against it. His powers are simply his powers and there was nothing else to it. Whatever problems would arise would be dealt with, but after the hard life he'd lived these past few years, he felt like he was owed some time to just be himself and not worry about anything else. And this was the first step to doing that. He reached the magic circle and 4 of the stone tablets vibrated furiously before a gem began to glow in each. Outside in the viewing lobby, the only sounds that could be heard were those of chewing coming from Aisha and Aubrey. The 2 girls had gotten slightly hungry while watching the exam, so they were currently snacking on bags of chips as they sat in their own world seemingly oblivious to the silence around them. Nobody blinked. Nobody even spoke. They were all too stunned to say anything. Alex was the first to break the silence as he stared gobsmacked at the young man he believed he'd had totally figured out. This has to be some kind of malfunction. Seemingly in response to that, Malachi began demonstrating his powers on the monitor and everyone could see his hands crackle with black lightning. Luna felt her brain completely freeze as she watched the young man who was just in her office last night shoot a destructive lightning blast from his fingertips that pulverized a target and the wall behind it. How is this possible? Luna weakly muttered. As if the sound of Luna's stunned voice was all they were waiting for, the girls suddenly looked up from their conversation to see the entire room staring at the monitor in disbelief. Our brother started already and we missed it. Aubrey pouted. It's okay, it seems like he's not done quite yet. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, Malachi got down on all 4s and his body shifted and stretched until he was a panther the size of a horse. It's really true. Morgan muttered. Did you know he could do that, Aisha? Aubrey asked. No, but do you think he'd let me ride his back if I asked? Maybe? Aubrey shrugged. The crowd that was watching this was completely shocked. Why are they treating this like it was normal? Hey, I just realized something funny. Aubrey suddenly exclaimed. Let me hear it. If brother is blessed by a god of thunder and a panther goddess, does that make him a thunder cat? Pfft. Aubrey, that's so lame. Aisha tried to hold in her laughter but it proved to be to no avail as the 2 girls' laughter resounded throughout the silent room. I wasn't certain this would work but, this is really kind of cool. The sight of a giant panther speaking human language left everyone in the exam room equally stunned and horrified. Malachi examined his current monstrous paws and sleek black fur. He thought it would feel strange to suddenly become a large furry creature, but interestingly enough, nothing felt wrong. He did not feel out of place or clumsy and was able to walk as if he'd been like this his whole life. I wonder if my power increases like this though. Malachi wondered if he could use his blessings simultaneously but ultimately decided this wasn't the place to test it. If something went wrong, not only would all of these people see him writhing in pain but so would the people watching on the monitors. As a man he had to maintain his dignity. Bianca suddenly spoke. Something wrong? I know you don't really know me or anything, but, can I pet you? She asked with sparkles in her eyes. Sure? Malachi was completely taken aback by the sudden request, and before he knew it, Bianca had run up to him and was stroking his fur. "Wah, you're so soft." Thank you?" He had no idea how to react to this sudden affection. Suddenly, he felt more pets at his side and turned to see Rio stroking him with his trademark bored expression. "Bastard. Why are you touching me? You said it was okay to pet you." "Yeah, for the hot girl, not you." "Oh, so you like me too? That's very good to know." Bianca was making several plans to make this man hers as she petted between his ears. "My girlfriend has a cat, you remind me of him." Rio continued to pet Mel, seemingly not caring about his irritation. "Then go torture that asshole and get away from me." Malachi swiped his huge claws at Roy's face only for Rio to duck under the blow and proceed to scratch his furry chin. Ah. Malachi's whole body relaxed from the sudden assault and he almost forgot why he was upset. Under the shocked gazes of everyone present, his body began to shrink drastically until instead of a massive frightening panther, he was only a small black house cat. "Kya. You're so cute." Bianca hurriedly scooped Malachi off the floor and held his small furry body in between her enormous breasts. "I don't even know how this happened, but I will not complain." Malachi was currently grateful for Bast's blessing the most. Suddenly, Bianca pulled him from her breasts and held him out in the air. "That's if you definitely have to be my boyfriend." "Pardon?" "Don't worry, I'll treat you really good." The other male examinees wondered if they'd have an easier time killing Malachi while he was still a cat. "Ahem." The instructor interrupted. "You two can sort all that out later, but for now let's let him finish his assessment." Okay." Bianca begrudgingly gave Mal a final hug before she planted a big kiss on his furry face and put him back down. Almost 2 minutes went by and Malachi was sitting at an awkward angle, still in his cat form. "You're not stuck, are you?" the examiner asked. "And no, I'm just waiting for my body to relax a bit." Bianca giggled and had a flirtatious look in her eyes, while the male examinees regretted not taking their chance to kill him. Eventually, Malachi returned back to human form and continued his exam. His golden flames were next to be on display, and Malachi learned an interesting fact. Because he had showed such destructive power with his lightning earlier, the examiner had taken even greater precautions and brought out targets made of tungsten. To the continued surprise of everyone present, his golden flames were almost immediately able to melt the resilient metal and would have done more damage had he not stopped them. Even though his flames burned at over 6,000 degrees, there was no heat coming off of them and everyone was able to stand around him comfortably, with Bianca noting that she felt absolutely nothing. Just how monstrous is this kid? Every power he's shown has been crazier than the last and he still has one left. In all his years in this job, the examiner has never seen anything like this. "Alright, let's finish and go home." Malachi took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. He realized through Aisha that his blessing from Nyx worked best when he was completely relaxed. Of all of his new abilities, this one undoubtedly awed and terrified him the most. He could feel the boundless potential of the ability inside of him and instinctively knew he hadn't even begun to scratch the surface of what he was capable of. His yellow cat eyes became empty and dark like Nyx's as he plunged the city into a panic. In the viewing room, they had just gotten over the reveal of Malachi's powers, but the shock was still present in their minds. Beast shifting, electrokinesis, and the flames of heaven. How was this even fair? They were currently waiting to see what he'd do next as he stood in a trance-like state in the middle of the examination room. Suddenly, the room began to get darker and darker with every passing second. People were utterly confused until someone pointed a trembling finger outside of the window and they all saw it. At 10 in the morning, the sky was as black as the darkest, coldest night imaginable. "Whoa, that's kind of cool," Aisha noted. "It's pretty," Aubrey agreed. Naturally, their words were heard by the panicked crowd and they looked at the two girls as if they'd just said the most outlandish words imaginable. "Are you girls crazy? It's horrifying. What is going to happen?" Suddenly, a sultry feminine voice cut through all the panic. "It's not scary." Everyone turned to see Luna staring out into the night sky with a mellow expression. "You're all afraid of what could lie within the dark and not the dark itself. But this..." Luna's eyes drifted to the black starless sky and a small smile formed on her face. "If you understand him well enough you'll see. His darkness is soothing and comforting." It is as if it's offering protection to wayward souls. Luna turned to Aubrey and gave the girl a warm smile. I understand what kind of man your brother is now. Aubrey returned her smile in kind and watched in awe at what happened next. Luna's eyes glowed a beautiful reddish pink before a shimmering apparition of a full moon appeared in the night sky. Her face broke out into a proud and arrogant smile that shot an arrow through the hearts of all the men present. As I thought, the two of us are good together, no? In the exam room, everyone was now giving Malachi confused stares. Nothing's happening. Is one of his powers a dud? It can't be if it's from a primordial right? Performance anxiety? He's been doing fine so far though. No one could figure it out. The man in front of them was just standing around seemingly in a trance. Even the examiner was stumped. Why wasn't anything happening? Hey, are you ALR dash? Buzz buzz buzz. The examiner took out his phone from his pocket and saw that it was his wife calling. She knows I'm at work, is something wrong with the kids? He hurriedly answered and the panicked voice of his wife echoed throughout the room. Honey. The sky, something's wrong. The sky? The examiner tilted his head in confusion. There were no windows in this room, so he had no way of knowing what she was talking about. I think it might be some kind of gate break. The sky is completely black even though it's morning. What? Look. Not just the examiner, but all of the examinees crowded around his phone to get a glimpse of what was going outside. A sky filled with black and no stars, with a shimmering moon in the center, looming ominously above. As if they all had the same thought at the same time, everyone in the room craned their necks to stare at Malachi in a new light. Jacob, if anything happens to me, I just want to tell you that I love you and I'm so grateful for dash. Janine, calm down, it's okay, nothing is happening. The examiner reassured as he walked up to Malachi. Bastard. You're scaring my wife. Smack. Ow. Examiner Jacob delivered a hard smack to the back of Malachi's head that snapped him out of his trance. Almost immediately, the dark sky began to break apart and the sun shone once more. Why is everyone looking at me like that? Do you really not know what you just did? Bianca asked hesitantly. Malachi rubbed his chin and put on a thoughtful expression. I'm really not sure. I was just trying to remember her, and suddenly I was in some kind of trance. That answer only seemed to terrify them more as they once again stared at him like he was a freak of nature. The examiner hung up on his wife and rubbed his temples. This was by far the most exhausting day he'd had in years. He looked up and stared into those yellow cat-like eyes. This boy. He's about to turn the world on its head and he doesn't seem to realize it. He could only imagine the storm that the guilds would cause as they tried to pull this man to their side. Malachi Saint, S. rank. As the examinees changed back into their regular clothes and prepared to leave, they were caught off guard to see everyone staring at them with incredulous expressions. Or more specifically, they were staring at Malachi. Suddenly, a white-haired girl and a black-haired one ran up to him with huge smiles. You did great. We definitely saw the whole thing. Malachi simply returned Aubrey's hug and gave Aisha a dry look. If you're gonna say something like that, at least wipe the chip crumbs off your face. Aisha's cheeks quickly became furiously red as she wiped her face. Why did you tell her? I thought she looked cute like that. Aubrey pouted. See cute? Aisha felt like she could die happy in this moment. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps interrupted the group and Malachi looked up to see a handsome blonde man in a sky blue suit walking towards him. He's a bit shorter than he looks on TV. Of course Malachi recognized one of the most powerful blessed in the world, but he wasn't all that excited to meet him. He knew it was the dream of millions of people all over the world to meet this man, but honestly? Mal couldn't really care less. His favorite blessed was always. Holy shit. Malachi vanished from his spot next to the girls and ran past the approaching Alex Heller and came to a stop directly in front of Morgan. You're Morgan Creed, right? I'm a huge fan. Malachi shook the hand of the stunned guildmaster with a wide smile on his handsome face. Morgan was stunned silly by this development. He thought he'd lost the opportunity to approach Malachi when he saw Alex heading towards him and had already resigned himself just to give up. But who would have thought this guy would actually be a fan of his? But this kid sure is strange. For someone blessed by a goddess of night, Malachi was not at all like he expected him to be. He was so kind. Shouldn't he be all edgy and monochromatic? His charisma was so infectious that it didn't take long before Morgan was wearing a genuine smile as well. Yes, that's me, and I've gotta say, young man, you have some incredible heaven-defying talent. I'm just lucky is all. Malachi shrugged. Hey, I know you probably get tired of this, but do you mind if we take a picture? He hesitantly asked. For you? Of course not. Aubrey hurried over and offered to take the picture since she knew how big of a fan her brother was of Morgan Creed. D.I.'s Coover dated novels on N.O.V/E/Lbin.co. She felt he deserved to have this momentous day documented properly. Reporters also took this opportunity to get photos of the world's first man to hold quad blessings. And judging by his reaction, they were certain they were also looking at the next member of Ragnarok. Malachi, I'd like to offer you a contract with Ragnarok. If you're interested in signing right now, you'll have $10 billion in your account within an hour. The crowd sucked in their breath. $10 billion. Most people here couldn't even dream about that large a sum. And here he was being offered that at the drop of a hat. Malachi opened and closed his mouth several times. Everyone immediately assumed he was so shocked, he just didn't know how to respond. Wait a second. The source of the sudden outburst was none other than Alex Heller as he confidently strode up to Malachi and Morgan and made his own proposal. Morgan, don't you think his value is too great for a measly $10 billion? $10 billion is measly? Fuck, I was poorer than I thought. Malachi was currently looking back at his life through new lenses. I am prepared to offer you $50 billion if you sign with True Sky. As the #1 guild in the country, we also have various resources we can offer you that you won't find anywhere else. Are you trying to steal from me again, you piece of shit? Morgan's eyes became the color of lava and the air around him became noticeably warmer. Now Morgan, calm down, I'm simply trying to offer our young friend here the best deal possible. Alex ignored Morgan's rapidly rising temper and gave Malachi a prize-winning smile. So what'll it be, kid? You wanna sign with Dash? Sorry, but I can't sign with either of you. I knew you'd make the right choice. Wait, what? Alex and Morgan stared at Malachi, completely dumbfounded. Not just them, almost everyone in the room was looking at him like he'd just grown a second head. He just turned down $50 billion, without batting an eye. Is there some reason you can't sign with us? Morgan had calmed down considerably and now was hopelessly confused. Malachi showed a cheeky grin before calling over his shoulder. Hey boss lady, you wanna tell them why I can't sign? Click. 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 The sound of heels clicking against linoleum echoed throughout the spacious room as Luna walked towards Malachi with a stack of papers in her hand. Mal, are you sure you want to do this? Your value is inconceivably high, and I only have the funds to offer you $1 billion at most. Luna had begun to second-guess this entire thing ever since she realized his true worth. Even though she wanted Mal to join her guild, she didn't want him to feel like he'd been taken advantage of. Malachi's only response was to take the papers from her hand. Got a pen? She absent-mindedly handed him one and he prepared to sign the papers only to be interrupted by Alex once again. Wait. Why would you settle for less money? Immortal Moon can't offer you half of what True Sky could. Malachi tapped his jaw with the pen in his hand and pondered how to best answer that question. Well, the only reason why I even came here today was to gain her approval. And as far as the money goes? Malachi looked towards his sister, who was watching him with proud eyes. I guess I don't really need it. I don't need to be the richest man alive, I just need to be able to provide for the only family I have left and give us a life worth living. We were eating sleep for dinner just last week, so just $1 billion is plenty for us. Plus, if I join this guild, I get to walk beside my oldest friend again, and that's all I've wanted ever since she got blessed. Aisha and Aubrey did not say anything, but they were both incredibly touched by Malachi's words. Morgan couldn't help but respect this young man. Truthfully, he found meeting most of his fans to be a burden since he never set out to be a hero of any kind. But meeting someone like Malachi left him grateful for his status that helped him form a bridge between them. Even if he wouldn't join his guild, he'd surely try to establish a friendship with this young man. Luna has a good recruit indeed. On the other hand, Alex felt like his brain was short-circuiting. 7 sit n-c/m for L-test vels. Could his enhanced hearing be failing him? Not only did this brat reject his exorbitant offer, he actually idolized that hothead Morgan over him. This boy was an idiot. Alex had never felt so humiliated in his life. You can't be serious, right? Alex swallowed his anger and tried to change Malachi's mind somehow. Immortal Moon is an all-women's guild. I'll make an exception. Luna waved her hand as if she was unconcerned. As surely the other members of the guild would feel, I don't care. Aisha interjected. Luna's two bodyguards looked at each other before shrugging as well. He's an invaluable resource. If Guildmaster Luna doesn't mind, I don't either. Seems like there's no more objections then. Malachi smirked. With everyone in the room watching, Malachi Saint and S-ranked Blessed became the first male member of Immortal Moon. Hey, can I join too? Bianca suddenly spoke up. Luna was only momentarily surprised by the girl's boldness before she smiled. I don't have a contract on hand for you, but if you come with me to the office I should have no problem getting you sorted out. An S-rank recruit and an A-rank one in the same day? Luna's luck seemed to be getting better and better. Luna left with Bianca and her two bodyguards, but not before writing Mal a check on the spot. It took everything in him to suppress his trembling hands as he looked at the exorbitant number written. Bianca blew him a small kiss and promised to come find him later, prompting Mal to scratch his cheek in embarrassment. Having women suddenly be so interested in him was definitely going to take a lot of getting used to. As Malachi and the girls left, Alex was still frozen in place as he stared at Malachi's disappearing back. Truthfully, he did not want to kill him, but by this point, he had no choice. He'd been publicly humiliated and passed up for a second-rate guild? He wouldn't be able to sleep at night if he didn't kill this boy to avenge himself. So sad, another young star dead so soon. Currently, Malachi and the girls were heading home before they prepared to move. Aisha had found a good realtor that could help get the two siblings into a nicer place by tonight. As the group arrived at their old run-down apartment, they frowned when they realized someone was in front of their door. With a sudden blowing of the wind, the group was able to see exactly who it was, and the girls' auras became murderous. Malachi sighed before he walked up to the uninvited guest. He didn't know why Melanie was here, but just seeing her gave him a massive headache. You're Malachi, right? Melanie hesitantly asked. For the most part. Melanie seemed to recognize his sarcastic tone of voice and realized that it really was him. She didn't get a good look at him in class, but now that she was up close she could see that he was not only incredibly handsome, but his eyes not hidden by sunglasses were slightly frightening. You, look good. I think it's the clothes. Malachi got tired of beating around the bush and decided to get to the heart of the matter. Why are you here? Melanie put on a complicated expression before she spoke. Well. You know how the sky got all dark and scary and stuff a minute ago? I vaguely recall something like that. Mal scratched his cheek in embarrassment. Just how much of the city did he put into a panic? He wondered how he'd be seen when the news about his assessment hit the news and internet. Melanie wondered why Mal suddenly looked like he was uncomfortable and ultimately decided he must have been bothered by her presence. Well. It's not like I don't understand. She sighed bitterly in her heart before she resigned herself to just say what she had to say and get out of here. Well, I thought it might have been some kind of gate break and I got scared that I was going to die. Should I apologize? The more Malachi heard, the more guilty he felt. Melanie looked Malachi in his illustrious yellow eyes and spoke clearly. I didn't want to die without apologizing to you for what I did. Malachi was momentarily stunned by the seriousness that he'd never seen from her, but soon recovered and put on his usual carefree demeanor. It's cool. No apology necessary. Mal waved his hand at her apology and moved past Melanie to open the door. Suddenly, he felt her grab his sleeve and looked back to see her trembling with her head facing the ground. I know you might not want to hear it, but I need to say it. I truly am sorry, Mal. Before Malachi could even turn around and ask her why she was going so far, she released him and ran away. He watched her get her car and drive off, his mind swimming in confusion. The next day. Pandemonium. That would be the only word to accurately describe the world's reaction when Malachi's existence was released to the public. Not just in America, but countries all over the world accused Malachi's testing facility of fabricating results to create a puppet with tremendous influence. A blessed with 4 different blessings from hires in entirely different pantheons? Who the hell would believe such an absurd lie? And then footage of Malachi's exam was released. Now guilds all over the world were calling Luna's phone attempting to buy Mal out of his contract with Immortal Moon. The prices offered were so exorbitant and outrageous that Luna would have agreed immediately had she not been so fond of Malachi. Naturally, since he'd shown her such incredible faith and loyalty, she couldn't just go and soil that, could she? Malachi himself was actually unaware of his meteoric rise to fame. As someone who didn't watch the news and was barely on social media, how could he know? He'd gotten a few texts from Serana, but he just assumed she was being overdramatic like normal. And he hadn't been back to class yet, so there was nobody staring at him in awe or whispering around him. While Aubrey knew, she didn't think her brother would care, so she didn't mention it. Currently, Mal was admiring his lavish new penthouse apartment. Since he didn't need much space with just him and Aubrey staying there, he found a perfect upgrade for them. It was only a 3-bedroom, but it was nicer than most mansions. Black granite floors with shiny golden chandeliers, expensive yet comfortable furniture chosen by Aisha, and even a balcony view of the city. He almost fainted when he saw the price, but Aubrey had reminded him they didn't have to be so cheap now that their situation had changed and they could afford to spoil themselves a bit. As he relaxed on his comfortable new couch, he found himself incredibly glad that he'd listened to her. Suddenly, Malachi's phone began to ring and he saw it was from Serana. The call had barely connected when her frantic voice pierced through his ear. "Mal. We need help, please." He immediately sat up and put a serious expression on his face. "Serana? What's wrong?" There was so much background noise on the other side of the phone that he couldn't even hear her clearly. All he could hear was something about her and her mother needing help, but that was more than enough. He dashed out of his apartment and headed for Say's restaurant, hoping he wouldn't be too late to help. "It's him. Kaya, he really does come here often. Can I get a picture?" Malachi stared gobsmacked at the enormous crowd of people that were packed outside of Say's restaurant like sardines. What the hell is this? Suddenly a pink-haired girl pushed through the crowd and came running up to Malachi out of breath and sweaty. "Huff huff, Mal. I'm so glad you made it. Serana? Why are all of these people here and why did you say you needed help?" "Well." Serana went on to explain how the older customers Mal had taken pictures with last time he was there showed their grandkids, neighbors, and just about anyone that would listen. Those same people had now come hoping to see the only man in the world with 4 blessings. "You idiot, you scared me." Malachi grabbed Serana by her pink cheeks and began to pull. "Ow ow ow. I'm sorry." As the crowd of onlookers stared at the interaction between the handsome man and the gorgeous young woman, a conclusion bubbled up in all of their minds. "Hey. Don't they look really close? They're both attractive, so. Do you think they're dating?" Malachi and Serana naturally heard the murmurs of the crowd and turned around to stare at them in horror. As if. Her mom is way hotter than her. "Are you calling me ugly, you piece of shit?" "No, just inferior. I'll kill you." Serana had to be restrained so that she did not strangle her friend, and once the two were separated, Mal could see the woman he'd just called hot a second ago amongst the crowd, a scarlet blush on her smooth cheeks. "She totally heard me." Malachi spent several hours taking pictures with everyone and meeting his supposed fans. Up TED chapters n.velben.com. The influx of customers was also great for Say's business, and she made more money today than she'd made in the last few years. She ended up running out of ingredients and ended up having to close shop early. As a thank you to Malachi, she invited him back to her home for some tea and dinner. Malachi naturally couldn't allow Say to cook for him again after she'd been doing so all day. Say was surprised when, upon arriving at home, Malachi immediately asked to borrow her kitchen. She of course tried to refuse since this was supposed to be a thank you for him after all, but Malachi was firm in his determination to cook for her and Serana. This brought about the current situation in which Malachi was sitting down to eat dinner with the mother-daughter duo. "Mal, you really made this?" Serana was staring at the meal in front of her in disbelief. "Yeah, does it look okay?" Malachi was visibly sweating. It was the first time he'd been able to cook with actual ingredients in a long time, so he was more than a little nervous. It looks incredible." Say was completely taken aback. She was only in the shower for about 30 minutes, but in that time Malachi had already begun to prepare a full spread. An elegant pasta dish with handmade noodles, a light but refreshing salad paired with fresh baked bread and red wine. Serana was literally drooling, earning a kick from her mother under the table. Well, don't just stare at it, dig and let me know how it tastes. Malachi tried not to show his nervousness, but it was tough. He felt like one of the contestants on a cooking show hosted by an angry Scottish man. He held his breath as Say and Serana raised their forks to their mouths and had their first bite. The silence seemed to last an eternity for Malachi as he waited to hear the girls' reviews. Suddenly they looked up at him with twinkles in their eyes as they saw him in a completely new light. It's incredible. It's so good. The blessed man finally released a sigh of relief when he heard his rave reviews. The group ate in utter silence as the girls hungrily devoured the food in front of them. When they were finished, Serana put on a sneaky expression before she left the room under the guise of doing homework. The atmosphere was slightly awkward as the two silently sipped wine in each other's company, both of them with a million things they wanted to say yet no idea where to begin. I can't believe you're really blessed by 4 hires. Say was the first to break the silence as she put on a cheerful smile. You're even an S-rank blessed. I'm honestly surprised you didn't get promoted to SSS right away. Malachi smiled bitterly when he heard the undeserved praise. The ranking system for the blessed is fairly simple. No matter how powerful a recruit might be, the highest rank they can achieve in their initial assessment is S rank. Blessed are able to increase their rank through mastery of combat, number of dungeons cleared and resources acquired. This system was out in place to avoid the tragedy of S-rank recruits getting too full of themselves and dying needlessly. I don't deserve something as great as that. I don't even know how to fight and my mastery over my powers is crude at best. Malachi shrugged. But you'll learn that stuff with the guild. I'm certain you'll reach SSS in no time. Truthfully, Malachi was still unused to such praise and found himself unable to respond. He who prided himself on always having a clever remark was completely at a loss for words in the face of compliments. With the silence once again setting in, Say hesitantly asked the question that had been plaguing her mind since earlier. What you said earlier, did you mean it? Malachi instantly understood her meaning and stared at her unflinchingly through dark sunglasses. I did. Ah. Serana told me something along those lines, but I didn't believe it. She did? That snitch. Malachi made a vow right then and there to teach her a good lesson later. That was supposed to stay a secret between friends. Well. Even if she told you everything, I want you to hear it from me. Malachi scooted his chair closer to Say and the mature woman got a full whiff of his cologne. He smells so good. But he's too close. I like you, Say. I always have. But I'm so much older than you, and I don't think someone of your status should be dash. I'm gonna stop you right there. Malachi interrupted. I don't give a damn about status, or public eye, or anything like that. And you being older than me doesn't matter either. In a rare moment of seriousness, Malachi took off his glasses and stared deep into Say's eyes. I like you because you're you, and that means that I like everything that comes with you, whether you think I should or not. I held it in for a long time but I want to be with you. Say had her concerns. Blessed are known to attract multiple partners. Whether it is their godlike power, beautiful appearances, or unique charisma, they attract so much attention that the laws had long since normalized polygamy as long as it is not excessive. Malachi hadn't even done anything yet, but already, the entire world had its eyes on him. Surely he would meet more women and eventually he would realize that there wasn't anything special about her at all. It was only natural that she be left behind in the end. The longer she looked at him, the more she wanted to be with him anyway. There was something about him that made her feel seen and valued, emotions that she hadn't experienced in a very long time. It was then that she made a decision that she was sure would come back to harm her later. Even if it will end with her being thrown aside or the subject of ridicule from the world, she wanted to feel this happiness for just a little bit longer. At least until he no longer needed her. Then, please take care of me, Malachi. Before he could react, she hugged him and buried her face in his neck. She didn't want him to see the scarlet blush that was spreading across her face uncontrollably. Malachi himself was in such disbelief he didn't even return her hug immediately. He thought for sure he was going to be rejected. Malachi wrapped his arms around Say and inhaled her warm scent of honey. Yeah. Of course I will. The two lingered like that for a while until the click of a cell phone alerted them to the fact that they were not alone. All right, Mom. Glad to see you're getting out there. You want me to tag you in this, Malachi? The two trembled in embarrassment from being spied on, and they quickly released each other and turned to face the intruder with furious blushes. "Gee, get out. Tag me and get out." The next day. Pow. Ow, fuck. Malachi received a hard punch to the nose that sent him falling back onto his butt. He looked up above him to see a lean muscular woman with short brown hair and olive skin, giving him a disdainful look. "I thought our new recruit would be more promising, but is this all you amount to?" Malachi awoke this morning at the top of the world. For the first time since his parents died, he woke up with a full stomach. He was sleeping in lavish sheets on a large and comfortable new bed, and he'd even woken up in a gorgeous new home. To top it all off, his confession to the woman he'd loved for years went successfully. He'd never been so happy to be alive. Is there a better way to wake up in the morning than with a smile, a good morning text from your beautiful girlfriend, and a bank account full of money? Aubrey of course noticed the way her brother was giddily walking around the house at breakfast, but she assumed he was just excited for his first day of training at the guild. What else could it be after all? Upon leaving the house, Malachi found his steps were as light as a feather. He drove to his first real job with a smile on his face the entire time. Upon entering the guild building, he went directly to Luna's office, where he found her drinking tea with a small white fox in her lap. "Mornin', boss lady." Luna and her pet both looked up and stared at the cheerful young man who just entered the room and were momentarily stunned by his radiant smile and infectious demeanor. "Morning, Mel, are you that excited for your first day of combat training?" "HM? Ah, sure, but isn't it such a beautiful day today? The kind that makes you grateful to be alive." Luna looked out the window to see a dark and cloudy sky with heavy rainfall. "Indeed it is." "Right?" Luna wondered what could be the reason for Mel's cheerful mood. It was then that she remembered a picture that had been circulating online of him embracing a woman. "Is that what this is? Why does that tick me off so much?" Luna swallowed her rising irritation and stood up and prepared to leave. "Humph. Let's go, Rose will break you if you show up late. Although maybe I should have him show up late so she can knock some sense into him." Luna shook off the thought almost as quickly as it formed. She didn't know why she was so irritated by the thought that Mel might be seeing someone, but she couldn't let him intentionally be hurt just because of that. As they left her office, Malachi noticed the change in demeanor of the mature woman. Is she having a bad day? Should I cheer her up somehow? Malachi was led to a high-tech training room where he saw an unfamiliar woman sparring with a familiar one. Aisha was sparring expertly with a woman of about her height, with twice her muscle. Both women were sweating profusely, yet did not seem to be showing any signs of slowing down. The sound of their clashes reverberated off the walls, and Malachi was in awe of the mastery being displayed. He knew Aisha was a monster, but because her fights had never been recorded, he didn't know just how skillful she really was. The gap between us. I'll definitely close it. All right, girls, come say hello. Luna finally made her presence known, and the two women ceased their spar immediately. Aisha hurriedly ran up to Malachi, and the two did their signature handshake, and he embraced her despite her sweatiness. You were so cool. If I knew you had hands like that, I wouldn't have ever talked reckless to you. The girl seemed overjoyed with such praise, and it immediately went to her head. Humph. Does that mean you're going to start showing me the respect I deserve? No? Who said that? Malachi smirked. My body can take the abuse now, so I'll stick to being me. Aisha's ego immediately deflated, and she gave Malachi a dry look. Cheeky bastard. He chuckled before turning his attention towards the new woman who was approaching. Mel, this is Rose Ortega. Like myself, she's a SS-ranked blessed, and she'll be your combat instructor. Aisha introduced. Nice to meet you. Malachi held out his hand and offered the woman a warm smile. Instead of accepting it, Rose cocked her fist back and delivered Malachi a solid punch to the nose. Oh fuck. Up to dat DFRM no, /. Rose stood over the fallen Malachi and gave him a disdainful look. I thought our new recruit would be more promising, but is this all you amount to? Aisha and Luna looked like this was well within their expectations. Out of all of Immortal Moon's members, Rose was the most eccentric. The girls waited to see how Malachi would handle what had become sort of an unofficial initiation ritual for new members. What the hell? Malachi groaned. Are you complaining with just the dash? That shit was so cool. Malachi popped up and stared at Rose with sparkling eyes. They say my speed is S rank, but man, I didn't even see you move. What? Rose stared at Malachi as if he'd just said the most outlandish shit imaginable. Did I hit him too hard? Is he broken? She was completely taken aback. Yeah, that's about the reaction I expected. Rose thought. Here, go put these on. She handed Malachi a pair of simple black sweatpants. What the hell, isn't this doofus more cheerful than normal today? Aisha wondered what could have possibly made her friend so happy that he smiled at a punch in the face. Malachi had gotten so close to Rose that the young woman's face had begun to turn an unhealthy shade of red. What kind of a weirdo are you? Get out of my face and go get changed. Sure thing, teach. Or should I call you master? Sensei? Yoda dash. Just call me Rose and go get dressed. Malachi hurriedly ran to the small dressing room to go and get changed, leaving the group of women to stare at each other in confusion. Why is your friend so weird? Don't ask me. He's extra cheerful today, so maybe he likes you. What? Rose yelped. He's handsome, sure, but we literally just met. Although I've never gotten such an interested look from someone before. I don't think that's it. Luna took out her phone and showed them a picture of what was obviously Malachi embracing a curvaceous woman whose face they could not see. I'm back. Malachi changed into a pair of loose black sweatpants and had wrapped his hands and feet in black bandages. He immediately noticed something was wrong when he saw the furious looks Aisha and Rose were giving him. You punk. How could you not tell me you're dating someone? Aisha was furious. Fuck that. Put your hands up, I don't want to cave your skull in. Rose was going to make him pay for embarrassing her. For the first time today, Malachi's mood was broken and replaced with a mild sense of fear. For 2 entire hours, Malachi was beaten like a toddler's drum set. Due to his enhanced physique and healing factor, no bruises were left behind, but the mental scars were more than enough of a reminder. He still had no idea what he'd done to piss Rose off so bad, but he made a silent vow to never do it again. As the fight went on, much to the surprise of the girls watching, Mal showed gradual improvement. He'd slowly learned to defend her blows and counterattack with his own. While his skill was not prodigal or masterful, it was impressive for a beginner and worth praise. Malachi lay on the floor, breathing hard and holding his ribs after Rose launched a devastating kick to his side. Can I ask? Huff huff. Why does it feel like you hate me? Seeing him play dumb made Rose even angrier, and she prepared to strike him again in the face only to be surprised when she gave him an honest answer instead. You think you can pretend to flirt with me so that I'll take it easy on you? I'll make your training a living hell. Excuse me? Malachi stared at Rose in complete shock. When did I do that? When I punched you in the face and you acted like you were so interested. Why am I telling him this? I can't stop myself. Rose was screaming at herself internally. Malachi slowly picked himself up off the ground and looked Rose directly in the eye. I wasn't flirting with you. I do think you're beautiful, but I was sincerely interested in the punch you threw. I don't know where the misunderstanding came from, but I hope we can be friends. Even though Mal's eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, that did not stop Rose from noting the seriousness in his gaze. Why you think I'm beautiful and cool? She hesitantly asked to confirm. No one in the guild or even in her life had ever told her she was cool or even beautiful. Scary? Yes. Brutal? Also yes. But she'd never been complimented as sincerely as she was now. She was already 28 and she'd never had a boyfriend. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. Yeah. You actually seem kind of nice when you're not trying to take my head off. Malachi responded without much thought. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Don't worry about it, just take care of me in the future, alright, teach? Malachi gave her a warm smile and once again held out his hand for a handshake. Rose stared at that captivating smile and outstretched hand for what felt like an eternity before she hurriedly turned around and ran out of the training room. Training over, great first day, see you tomorrow. With that she was gone, leaving Mal scratching the back of his head in confusion. I thought we were getting along better, but was I mistaken? Luna and Aisha suddenly approached Malachi from their spot on the wall, and he was immediately reminded that there was another woman who wanted to kill him earlier. You bastard. You got another girlfriend and didn't tell me? Aisha roared. The subject of the woman who was now his put a giddy smile on Mal's face that only served to infuriate her even more. I was gonna tell you eventually. I just kind of forgot since it still doesn't feel real. This is Surana's mother, right? Aisha asked while looking at the picture again. And mother? Luna's entire world trembled with just those simple words. Yeah. Mal's voice was so delirious it was as if the mere mention of her was enough to put him under a spell. Aisha nodded, seemingly satisfied that her deduction was correct and with his choice of partner. Wait, Malachi. Luna suddenly intervened. How old is this woman? She'll be 38 in the spring. Oh. That reminds me I should start thinking of birthday plans for her. Maybe you could take her on a trip? Aisha suggested. That's good, but where would we go? As she listened to Malachi and Aisha plan for this woman who was about the same age as her, Luna felt like she was going insane. Mal, you like older women? Loves them. Aisha responded dryly. It's an addiction, really. Mal confirmed without an ounce of shame. Then does that mean No, what am I thinking, I'm his boss? Luna stuffed her impure thoughts down almost as quickly as they formed. Mal's phone suddenly vibrated and he smiled when he saw that it was a text from Say asking him to come to the restaurant. He hurriedly changed out of his sweats and put on normal attire, before bidding the two women farewell and running out of the building. On the way to the parking lot, he ran into Bianca, who scowled at him and yelled something about not giving up before she turned around and ran off. I didn't think Surana had so many followers, seems like a lot of people saw that picture. At the time, Malachi was still unaware of his new fame and didn't think that the picture spread so far simply because he was tagged in it. Arriving at the restaurant, Malachi could see that it was busy, but not quite as bad as yesterday. Word seemed to have gotten around about how good the food served was, and now Say had herself a number of new regulars. Say was waiting for him outside when he pulled up and he happily hopped out the car and embraced her. I missed you. She shyly returned his hug and hoped that Surana wasn't hiding somewhere taking pictures again. I missed you too. Malachi planted a kiss on her forehead and Say's face became as red as her underwear. Deciding to focus before she fainted, she led him inside so she could talk about why she called him here. In the corner of the restaurant, there was a man sitting down holding a large briefcase in his lap. That man showed up looking for you about an hour ago and begged me to call you. I thought about kicking him out, but he looked so desperate. Say explained. Malachi looked at the man seated and was able to confirm that the man did have an aura of desperation and hopelessness. Not only that, but he could hear his heart beating rapidly as if he was incredibly nervous. Malachi sent Say away and walked forward to meet the man. When the man's eyes landed on him, they flashed with hope and he stood up and offered his hand. Mal didn't know at the time that what this man wanted from him would change his mentality about life going forward and make him the most powerful blessed in the world. Malachi shook the man's hand politely and he hurriedly introduced himself. I was worried you wouldn't come. I'm Rowan Ivers. Good to meet you. Mal warily took a seat opposite the old man and stared at him as if he was trying to get a read on his intentions. All things considered, the man opposite him seemed harmless. He was an older man around 65, with wiry gray hair and a pair of crooked glasses. There were deep black bags under his eyes indicating it had been several nights since he'd gotten proper rest. His clothing was wrinkled and disheveled and Mal could smell liquor on the man's breath. You seem harmless enough, but... Mal took off his glasses and Rowan flinched when he saw those predatory yellow eyes. Tell me, old man. Why are you taking up space in my girlfriend's restaurant looking for me? You don't seem like a fan. I have come with a proposition. Roland stammered. Ever since Mal had taken his glasses off, it was hard to meet his gaze. He felt as if he was standing in front of a giant beast that was ready to tear his throat out should he tell the slightest lie. A proposition? You're not about to do something silly, like ask me to leave a mortal moon, are you? And no, that's not it. Mal could hear the old man's heartbeat rapidly increasing and became increasingly curious as to what sort of proposition could be causing this sort of reaction. Why, you see, I've been waiting for someone with your particular blessing to come along. Or one of them, I suppose. My blessing? Only someone with a blessing like yours could pull off what I'm about to ask you without being caught. Rowan confirmed. Mal's gaze intensified, but Rowan had come too far to back down now. I am an expert on mythology and occult studies, and I have the necessary knowledge to help you learn how to use your powers in ways that you never thought possible. Bold claim for you to make as someone who's not even blessed, Malachi pointed out. I don't need to be. I've studied your kind ever since the first blessed appeared, and I can say with the utmost confidence that I can help you. I can simply learn to master my powers from the guild or in the gates. True, but much of what any of the blessed could teach you would only be feelings-based, and it would lack much of the technicality. And it's not practical to attempt to learn something like that on the fly, you know? You should study as much as you can beforehand to decrease the chances of putting your life at risk. The old man's words made sense to Malachi, but the uneasy feeling bubbling up in his heart kept him on his guard. In addition to helping you. Rowan placed his briefcase on the table and slid it towards Malachi. I am also prepared to offer you my life savings, provided you listen to my request. Malachi could tell from the old man's struggle lifting the briefcase that it contained no small amount of money. This is shady as hell, old man. You're acting like you're about to ask me to kill someone. Seeing the man's deadpan expression, Malachi's heart dropped. You're fucking crazy. I know I wear sunglasses a lot, but do I really look like a fucking hitman? The dreaded young man stood up and began to walk away, only to be stopped when he felt the man grab his sleeve. Please. He took my daughter from me. Malachi looked over his shoulder to see the man looking down and tears falling onto the table. As someone who'd cried their fair share of tears in life, Mal was naturally weak to the tears of others. Especially ones that come from loss. This old man begging him so sincerely was bringing up old memories and tugging at his heartstrings. He was not a person with a hard heart, his sense of empathy was well above most. I'm too easily manipulated. He gradually sat back down and had the old man wipe his face before he explained to him why he couldn't do it. Look, old man. I'm no killer. You're better off looking for someone on the dark web for this kind of thing. Rowan was unconvinced and spoke through muffled sobs. You are blessed, so that means you kill monsters, right? That's what they tell me. Malachi hadn't even been inside of a gate yet. I can promise you. This man is more of a monster than anything you might find in the gates. The man began rustling through his jacket pocket and pulled out a photo of a man. Look, old man, be that as it may, I think maybe you should call the police or... Malachi's words trailed off as he stared at the photo of a man he wouldn't forget for even a single second. This is Arthur Rowland. Fuck everything I just said in its entirety. Malachi interrupted. The man was confused for a brief second before he saw Malachi's eyes shift from an illustrious yellow to an intense orange. I'll do it. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by .com. It had been a few hours since Malachi's meeting with Rowan and he hadn't moved from the table where it took place. Say of course noticed his downtrodden air and brought him a drink after the shop closed. You kind of looked like you needed something stronger than tea. Say sat 2 glasses on the table and poured them both a shot of whiskey. Malachi knew he couldn't get drunk from this with his new body, so he did not stand on ceremony and gulped it down. He thanked her for the drink and afterwards the two simply sat in silence, with her simply holding his hand as they stared out the window. She knew something was wrong with Mal, but she did not want to push him and ultimately decided to wait for him to speak about what was bothering him. She was also enjoying just spending time together like this. Say? Yes, Mala, I mean honey? She blushed profusely and regretted not dimming the lights before they sat down. Malachi chuckled at Say's cute sides before he asked the question that had been plaguing his mind. If I became a murderer, would you look at me differently? Say's eyes widened in shock when she heard Malachi ask a question she never expected. For as long as Say had known Malachi, he'd been the sweetest man imaginable. Even before their relationship progressed, Mal had always helped out with housework after he'd finished tutoring Surana and made conversation with her. She'd never seen him upset or even badmouth someone. He was the very image of a kind and considerate young man. Even when his parents were taken from him, instead of being angry and lashing out, he grieved silently and started working to provide for Aubrey. Say didn't believe Mal had a malevolent bone in his entire body. So what was with this sudden talk of murder? As she stared into Malachi's eyes, she saw a great range of emotions. There was anger, which was new, but there was something more as well. Is he afraid? It was then that Say realized that despite the stoic aura Malachi was trying to present, he was actually quite afraid of how she would react. Say placed her hand on his and gave him a warm reassuring look. Why don't you tell me what's going on? Mal debated internally how much he should reveal, before ultimately deciding he didn't want to hide things from someone he cared so much about. So in the end he divulged everything. He told her about how Rowan's daughter was violated by the man he'd been asked to kill, which led to her committing suicide. He opened up the briefcase of money he was given and Say gasped in shock when she saw the exorbitant amount of money inside. It was easily around $500,000. Say had never seen such a large amount of money in her life, and Malachi pulling it out so casually had almost caused her to faint. She listened to him as he explained that Rowan claimed to be an expert on the occult and mythology who could help him master his powers. In the end, when he told her about his acceptance of the job, there was silence once more. As the day slowly descended into night, the two sat there watching all of the cars on the city streets go by. I will not look at you any differently. Say honestly answered. Malachi was honestly surprised by this answer and looked at the woman with a slightly bewildered look. I know if I'd lost Serana the same way that man lost his daughter, I would probably feel the same way. I think this man lost everything that would qualify him as a human a long time ago. Say comforted. But can I ask what made you accept Dash? Well said. A new voice spoke. The couple looked across the table to see the goddess of the night wearing her signature starry black dress. Who are you? Say thought she would be frightened by this woman's sudden appearance, but instead she felt strangely comfortable. She felt as if she was taking a slow walk in a crisp cold night. She is Nyx. Malachi answered for her and offered the goddess a warm smile. It's good to see you again. I didn't know gods were allowed to come down here so freely. Don't compare me with those low-level gods. Nyx frowned. They only hold power over an aspect of nature, while I embody a part of creation itself. Nyx stared out into the night with a satisfied expression as if she were looking in the mirror. Therefore I have a bit more leeway than the others. But that's unimportant for now. Nyx stood up and analyzed Say from head to toe. You've chosen well, my child. I'm not particularly fond of humans, but this one seems an exception. Say could only blush as she received a genuine compliment from what was undoubtedly the most beautiful woman she'd ever seen. Malachi said nothing, but he squeezed Say's hand lightly and smiled. But my son. Nyx drifted her eyes to Malachi and her tone became slightly more serious. Even if he is the one that harmed your sister, to hunt down another human in cold blood will undoubtedly take something from you. Are you prepared for that? This man harmed Aubrey too? Say's heart wrenched at the sudden revelation. Just how much had Malachi and his sister been through? Mal's gaze became hard and he stared unflinchingly at Nyx. I am. To say, Mal sounded incredibly sincere and convincing, but Nyx knew better. Because darkness hides everything, the night sees all. Therefore, nothing could be hidden from the personification of night herself. Even if they weren't connected through her divinity, Nyx could feel the fear that Malachi was shoving down. Fear that in killing that horrible man he would also lose something critical for being human. And yet she could feel his unwavering determination to go through with this task anyway. What a kind child I've chosen, he will undoubtedly shoulder the weight of the world. Nyx knew there was nothing she could say to sway Malachi from the path he'd decided to walk, so she planted a kiss on his forehead that sent a warmth streaming throughout his body. Walk always in my night, child, and you will never be alone. With that she disappeared, leaving behind a reassured Malachi. He couldn't explain it, but conversing with Nyx always gave him the same feelings that he got when he talked to his mother while she was still alive. Is it because she calls me her child? It's oddly comforting. Malachi turned to apologize to Say for the somber mood only to see her glaring at him. What's the matter? Even if she's a goddess, how could you let her kiss you? A small smirk appeared on Malachi's face. Is my dear Say jealous? Of course I am. Even I have not. Say realized that she was being completely honest despite her intention to lie. Her face slowly became as red as a tomato before she immediately got up and prepared to run away. She was completely surprised, however, when Malachi pulled her in by her waist and planted a warm kiss on her lips. Say's body immediately tensed up before she melted like snow in his grasp. New STRIs at n/vel/b/i/n.co. The two lingered like that for a while, each of them seemingly trying to ingrain the taste of the other in their memory. The next day, Malachi went about his usual routine. He woke up early to go to the guild so that Rose could train him for 2 hours before he changed and went to class. Every person that knew him could tell that he wasn't quite right, but what could they do when he so adamantly stated that he was fine? Luna, Surana, Aubrey, and Aisha were all incredibly worried about the always cheerful young man who'd suddenly become much more quiet. Night had fallen and Malachi was driving his nice car to an unknown part of the city. After a 20-minute drive, he arrived at a run-down abandoned building and promptly got out. He saw Rowan waiting for him and promptly began to shrug off his nice jacket and roll up his sleeves. "All right, old man. Let's work." Night had already fallen over Woodcrest Maximum Security Penitentiary. Arthur Rowland was currently heading back to his cell for lights out. He heard the familiar yelling of the guards before the lights cut off in the cell block and he climbed into his cot. Top bunk was his, so he stared up at the ceiling and began counting tiles as he tried to drift off to sleep. Arthur Rowland. "HM? That you, fish cake?" Arthur was sure his cellmate was already asleep, but maybe he wasn't. In prison for sexual assault, 2 victims ages 15 and 17, but there's a lot more that just haven't come forward, right? The longer the voice spoke, the easier it became for Arthur to tell that this was not his cellmate. Sensing something was amiss, Arthur scrambled to look down from his bed, only to see an extremely tall man that he didn't recognize. He was wearing simple black pants with a white shirt and the top button undone. He was in the corner of the room, staring out a barred window while smoking a cigarette. "The fuck? Who are you?" "Unimportant." The man waved his hand and dismissed the question. Arthur's eyes widened. He'd seen enough people die in prison to know what a hit looked like. He had to call for help before it was too late. G-guard, dash. In a flash, the man who was leaning motionlessly against the wall appeared in front of him and quickly clasped his jaw shut. "This ain't really the best environment for conversation, is it?" Suddenly, dark mist rose up from the ground and covered the 2 men before they disappeared from their spot. Not long after that, a pair of guards arrived and shone their flashlights inside of a cell. They repeatedly banged on the bars to awaken its occupants only to become incredibly alarmed when there was no movement. Opening the gates, the 2 men rushed inside and found an overweight man in the bottom bunk and an empty bed on the top. They tried to shake the one inmate awake but got no response. There was no blood, no signs of blunt force trauma or even strangulation. It was as if his heart had just stopped beating. "Put the cell block on lockdown and bring me some goddamn defibrillators." Gah. Arthur fell out of the darkness and immediately noticed he was outside. Everywhere he looked, there was nothing but dark forest surrounding him. What the hell? "Welcome to Tongass National Forest." Arthur looked for the source of the voice and found the man who brought him here leaning up against a tree, cigarette still in hand. Interestingly enough, this just so happens to be the largest forest in the U.S. The man spun around and admired the cool night air mixed with the rich scenery that only he could make out. 500 miles of nothing but nature. He turned around to look at the convict who was shivering on the ground. He took off his glasses and revealed a pair of intense orange eyes. "Perfect for us to have a little chat, don't you think?" When he smiled, a mouthful of pointed canines were revealed. "Why, you're a blessed. I thought the use of superpowers would have given it away, but apparently you're not very quick." Arthur's heart immediately dropped to his stomach and he prostrated on the ground. Please. I haven't done anything to offend Dash. Aubrey Saint. Pardon? Rosaline Ivers. Look, I don't know who Dash. Crack. Gaia, Hearing that Arthur didn't even recognize the names of 2 of the girls whose lives he'd ruined, Malachi's already frightening mood became worse and he delivered a swift and powerful stomp to the convict's hand. "Stop screaming, you sound like a child." Malachi placed his heel on Arthur's neck and ground his face into the earth. "All right, are you listening?" "MMH. Good." Malachi nodded, satisfied. "We're going to play a little game. I'm going to let you up and you're going to run really fast and far. Once you're far enough away, I'm going to chase you, but don't worry, I won't use my night blessing, since that'd be cheating after all." Arthur began to furiously wiggle and scream into the dirt as if to make known that this sick contest was still very unfair. "Calm down, man, if you can survive until morning you're free to go. See? I can be nice too." Malachi looked at his watch and saw the time was a little after 9. "All right then, you're free to go." Once his abductor's foot was off his neck, Arthur scrambled up from the ground and took off running in a random direction. Malachi watched the man's orange jumpsuit disappear before he sighed out loud. Should I draw a picture in the dirt while I wait? Arthur was currently covered in sweat and dirt and having the worst night imaginable. He was snatched out of his bed in the dead of night by some blessed and made to participate in this sick and twisted game of cat and mouse. He'd been stumbling around in the dark for hours being chased by wild animals, falling into rivers and tripping in mud. The entire time he was out here, he never once caught sight of his abductor and assumed he was doing a good enough job at covering his tracks. Eventually, he wondered if he was just tricked into running around like an idiot for several hours. Finally, after several hours, light had finally began to show on the horizon. Arthur smiled as hope filled his system before he kept running. He wouldn't feel safe until the sun was completely up, but this did ease his nerves a bit. When the sun finally rose and the last of the night had been chased away by the sun, Arthur collapsed where he stood and cried tears of joy. He'd survived. Somehow someway he'd done enough running to escape from some crazy powerful blast. I wonder if this is how they felt. Arthur's happy mood disappeared immediately before he felt the wind get knocked out of him and went flying towards a tree. He coughed furiously and attempted to inhale sweet air into his lungs before he looked up to see a giant panther the size of a horse. What the fuck is that? I thought it was that guy. Finally getting a sense of safety when they arrived home, only for you to heartlessly shatter it when you broke in. Only when he watched the panther speak again did he realize this beast and the man that brought him here were one and the same. Why, you said. I know exactly what I said. Malachi prowled forward, his claws tearing up the earth beneath him with every step. I just wanted to show you the same despair my sister and all those other women felt. Arthur's body began to shiver uncontrollably and he unknowingly wet himself. Please, I was really sick back then but I'm bet / Before Arthur even realized what happened, Malachi had swiped his razor-sharp claws across his chest. Blood began to flow almost immediately and Arthur became a screaming crying mess. Follow EOist stories at nvl/by/n.com. Better? Don't make me laugh. I won't even allow you to say any of that useless shit. Malachi's anger had long since reached a boiling point. Seeing his prey attempting to crawl away, Malachi's instincts that he'd been holding on to all night long burst forward and he bounced on top of the wailing man. The rest was a blur as Malachi ripped Arthur into shreds. Blood spattered, bones were crushed, entrails flew, and flesh was turned into mincemeat. Even when Arthur's screams had long since ended, Malachi continued to maul his victim as if he didn't want him to have a body even in death. When it was over, Malachi let out a defiant roar that shook the ancient trees surrounding him.